Okay.
Hey, good morning. This is the Texas Real Estate Commission workshop on November the 8th, 2022, election day. Hope everybody has voted or it's moment time to vote. We'll go and call this meeting to order at 8:57 a.m. First agenda item, I believe General Counsel Burgess is going to take the lead on this. It's regarding annual statutory training. And there's some stuff in here that I wanted to make sure we had and we covered, and so I'll turn it over to General Counsel Vanessa Burgess.
Okay. Actually stand for this. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So in November, we do our annual statutory training, just as a little bit of a review of we send the commission guide, which is updated every year to make sure all the links, all the information is correct, and we sent you a copy of that. And I had said that we would send you via DocuSign the acknowledgement form, although what we'll try and do today during one of the breaks is if we can get everyone who's here signature, that's super helpful, because then we know we have it. And then we can catch, I think it's just Commissioner Williams who's not here, we can catch him via DocuSign. But we did send you that, and that guide is really meant to be a reference point throughout the year, just if you have questions or you want to, oh, who does this, where, what's that North Carolina dental board thing that Vanessa's always talking about, that kind of thing, that's in there. And so I will not train on the entire guide in the interest of not having everybody fall asleep. But the chair did ask me to cover today in training a couple of different things, one of which is a little bit of a launching point. I'm going to do a similar training for all of the advisory committees, and I want to use this training today, especially your feedback, your responses to answers, to help inform the training for the new commissioners who come on. We've done one round of that with Commissioner Lerner and Commissioner Woodruff, Commissioner Pena. That was Chelsea and mine's first round of new commissioner onboarding, and we've had some great feedback from Commissioner Russell and Wilkinson and Miller about things they wish they would have known. And so as I start this, please know that I'm trying to ask some questions and convey some messages that I'm hoping I can then carry forward to the advisory committees, because I think, they always need a little bit of a reminder of why are you on this committee? What is the purpose of this committee? What hat? Chair Geisner always talks about you wear two hats as a commissioner, right? Well, you wear your commissioner hat sometimes, and then you wear your broker hat or your just regular person hat. And what does that mean when you're doing stuff on behalf of the commission? And somewhat more relevant into this training is, what does that mean just when you're out in your everyday practice and you have that commissioner hat? Are you wearing it when you're doing business? Are you wearing it when you are out talking about things, that kind of a thing? So we'll look at that. I'm really hopeful. We're in a unique position today in that we've got commissioners who are relatively new, and I would say that of the three newest members, though not super new anymore. We've got commissioners who are about halfway through their term, and then we've got commissioners who are towards the end of their term. And so I imagine the experiences and the insight that all three groups have are pretty varied and informative. And so I'm really hoping, as much as I'm conducting this training, that it's more of a conversation and an opportunity to open up and talk about that experience. Okay, so I wrote some questions, and I am going to, I talked to the chair about this, a little bit of a law school it, in that I'm going to call on folks. But it won't be as terrifying as when you get called on to recite, an entire case in front of 200 people, I hope. So we'll start, these are a little bit of icebreakers, but I think they're also very relevant to the questions we were just talking about, to the roles, to the hats that you wear. So I think I would start with Commissioner Miller. Why, and she does not know this is coming, by the way, why did you choose to serve on the commission?
Really to continue to help the industry. I could see it as a place that needed help as far as I was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one more thing to do in my career.
Right. Commissioner Buss, why did you choose to serve on the commission?
Did you say Russell?
Yes, sorry, I should be speaking up. Why did you choose to serve on the commission?
Much the same reason, and I was asked about it several years ago, would I have an interest, and I thought about it, so when the opportunity was available, I said, absolutely.
Right. And then Commissioner Woodruff, I've asked you this before.
Yeah, well, you know, from my standpoint, I feel like that as the industry needs to continue to raise the bar on behalf of practitioners, on behalf of the public, which is why the commission exists, I guess. And that I think there's things we could do to improve outcomes with consumers on the regulatory side, but also just looking at new and better ways to work with the practitioners, in terms of expectations and I guess really just the level of service that we provide. Because in my view, coming from that side, I see a lot of less than desirable, practice in my opinion.
And then maybe for some public member perspective, Commissioner Pena.
Mostly to serve. I'm coming from a different board, so I thought I would be able to operate an outsider's perspective into a similar licensing body. So it's mostly service.
Yeah, and that's true because you hold a license as well, but it's probably a totally different process.
Right, it is.
And then Commissioner Hartgraves, as our other public members here.
Yeah, it's important to have good governance.
Okay, and I think that's something I would say. I think you always are very concerned with the operations of the agency and are things being handled the way they're supposed to be, which I think is really helpful. I also have an interest in that, obviously. And then Commissioner Lerner, what about you?
Pretty much what Mark was saying as well. I just see a need for raising the bar and understanding what's going on in the industry and looking at all of the processes so we can remain valuable, because if not, technology is right there knocking on the door.
Okay, and I think I've asked everyone except Commissioner Wilkinson and the chair. So I Commissioner Wilkinson and then Chair Kesner.
Well, everyone, I think we all have in our heart why we're here is because we wanted to get back and to serve and try to do a better job maybe than we have seen happen in the past. And when I was asked, would you consider serving, I was aware that there was, some things, decisions I might have to make that might be hard. But that's also, as Mark and I think we share, it seems like I kind of step into roles sometimes, whether it's in community or in the business, of trying to get to solutions. And I think that's why we're all here. We want to try to serve and share the experience. I mean, how many years since 1973 in many different realms of real estate. So hopefully I've done what I need to do.
Chair Kesner?
Well, I mean, I followed the commission for a long, long time. When a chairman from years ago, John Walton from Lubbock, was very involved in Texas Realtors, and TREC was also a Century 21 franchise owner. And so I kind of watched TREC go through different periods. And from an agency that I thought was the beacon on the hill to an agency that just didn't seem to be where it needed to be. And I asked to serve and was asked to serve, and so I wanted to make TREC the agency it should be to protect consumers, but yet at the same time, you have to be able to help your license holders make a living and do business in an honest and fair, ethical business, but you can still protect the consumer. And I don't think the two were together at that time, and I think we should always strive to get them together. We have to protect the consumer. Best way to protect consumers is make sure we have an industry where people can make money, support their families, and do it honestly and ethically. And that's why I chose to serve.
That's great. And I won't call on everyone for all of these. I just think that one is such an important one to get out into the room and talk about. So here's a question that I think will be interesting from the perspective of all three. I gave you kind of three categories of where you are in your terms, but is your understanding of how the commission works different now than it was?
That's almost an understatement.
How so?
There was so much hatred when I got into the commission. I mean, and actually it was justifiable. It was a crazy time as far as a realtor's look into the commission. And I mean, the first day I got here and saw the stats and saw how many licensees there were and how many calls y'all were fielding from the state, and how on earth were you able to handle that? And then I think, again, service and making it better is, I remember being so aggravated. It was the first case I got really mad about. And I still remember the stupid kid that got 4 felonies charged against him. One was because he carried a shotgun in the back of his car, of his pickup truck. It lived in San or he would say.
Who doesn't?
And one of the TREC issues was that he didn't remember to renew his license. That kid was going through crazy times, and we sat on him again. I felt sorry for him, and I realized how many. I know my brother asked me to speak on a panel to our company after my first meeting. He said, "Tell us what you learned," and I said, "Don't drink and drive and don't do drugs." And that's really what I learned the first meeting, but my eyes have been opened over the years.
Yeah, this is a totally different commission today. And when I came in, I don't think any of us really know what's the guts of this agency or any agency until you kind of see how y'all walk in your shoes and understand that. The work that you all do, I just would reiterate what she just said. It's amazing to me. And I hesitate many times to even call on you guys because frankly, I know that you're overworked. I know that when I'm called, I don't care what it is. I mean, you've answered the phone or answered the text. So, to be aware of just the duties and the stuff that you do. I mean, Amber's a good example. She's kind of the front door, the first person I met, and the service she did for us as commissioners, goodness gracious, and everybody here. So you don't find, I don't think you find that in every company or every situation, but anyway, I just compliment you for the changes that you have made internally and for the relationship that you have built with our association of realtors and throughout the state. That wasn't here 6 years ago.
When we got here, excuse me for interrupting, TREC and TAR weren't even speaking. I mean, it was a nasty relationship. I'm sure that's what you saw in the cheers of.
Well, it was somewhat earned, though. I mean,
Somewhat.
when they were talking about a 15 or 20-minute hold on the phone, it was, oh my gosh, unbelievable. The customer service was so lacking. And then you didn't really, it seemed like whoever you got wasn't totally knowledgeable. It was hard to deal with because, I don't know, I don't have a lot of patience with stuff like that. The longer I hold on the phone, by the time someone answered, I'm ready to jump down their throat. And that probably did show, and they were very nice back to me. And I've just seen that change. I mean, it's just, what I get from you all, what do you need to make you successful as a commissioner? And that makes me want to just knock myself out because there's such a good working relationship, and it wasn't coming in. And I don't remember who I was talking to, said, I can't believe they think a 15 or 20-minute hold on the phone's acceptable. It just wasn't. But, it's all turned around. I mean, it's a pleasure to do this job. Yeah, it is.
Gosh.
It's fun now. It wasn't fun in those first days and weeks and months and years. I'd say the first 2 years was tough.
Yeah, well, and you all were here at a tough time, right? What about Commissioner Lerner? Is your understanding of how, I'm forgetting what question I'm on, is your understanding of how the commission works different now than it was?
A little.
A little? How so?
It's really kind of hard. It's like, I don't know, my personality's a bit different, and I don't know. I take this as a job to me. I don't take it as a title. I don't take it as any of that. It's a job. And so I do feel like I'm trying to do a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly thought it was going to be more work than it should be. So I think I'll do a lot to support everyone. So, I don't know. I thought it was going to be honestly more involvement than we actually have.
How so? I mean,
So-
that's a good,
So I just, meeting wise and whatever else, I just felt like there would be more. Like, I feel like sometimes it's just like you have a meeting once a quarter or whatever, however many times, and then that's it. And I choose to be a little bit more involved, obviously, but I thought it would be more involvement as a whole. If that makes
like in
sense.
the day-to-day
Yes.
kind of stuff.
Mhm.
What about you, Commissioner Pena?
It's exactly what I expected.
That's what he told me yesterday when we
Yeah.
were walking over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's identical, but different in certain
Mhm.
nuances.
I'm trying to decide if that's good or bad.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
from staff.
But what I said, yeah. Well, there's a level of excellence that I see in you all that's similar over there. And you all are very polished, you got it down good, I think. The amount of work that you put in and kind of keep us in line, these are your boundaries. You do a really, really good job at it. And so, it's not different than what I didn't know what to expect, obviously, coming into something new, but.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very familiar with everything that is going on. I'm not surprised to see what I've seen. Even to the type of enforcement cases that come down. Yeah, I've seen them. Because I was on the enforcement. I was the enforcement chair on the other side. And
Well, and you all heard the cases, right? It was a little bit of a difference.
We had a committee dedicated to all the enforcement cases. In fact, our cases seldom went to SOA. But once in a while, you'd get one go to SOA. But we deliberated, and there's some easy ones that are easy, slam dunk, okay, no question, no discussion, I'll move on. But then there's others that you get the right in the middle of the way where, you've got different perspectives, particularly with public versus the ones that are in the profession, differences of opinion. And so that discussion is good. And that's why they have public members to give you an outside look coming in. But it's exactly what my expectation was, and nothing's changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Commissioner Hartgraves?
It's pretty much exactly what I expected.
Is it? Okay. Okay, I think the second one or the third one's probably a little bit similar, as is the fourth one, so I'll throw them both out, and if anyone wants to answer them, they can. I wanted to get the dialogue going on this training, so it's not just me up here, talking the whole time. So I've got, what is the most surprising part of joining the commission, or how has serving as a commissioner been different than anticipated in terms of the role you play? And I think Commissioner Lerner spoke to that she thought she would see a lot more day-to-day involvement, versus a little bit more of the quarterly meetings and the advisory committee meetings, right?
I'll be glad to start on that one. The most surprising part, because I did go through leadership at the state level and the national level, and there was a disconnect. I mean, advertising in 2013 to 16 should have been a slam dunk for this agency and the association to get together, and it just built a huge wall. So when I was appointed, the first thing I did is I met in this room with every staff member, head of each department, each attorney, everybody, and Chelsea was here and Doug was here, and I met with everybody. And when I left Texas Realtors, I told everybody, nobody had better staff than Texas Realtors. Everybody was on the bus, in their position, doing what they were supposed to do. And my biggest surprise, I'll never forget this, I called Paul on my way home, was what an incredible staff TREC had. And I couldn't understand how you could have such great staff and still have such a huge disconnect. And it went back to leadership. And I mean, some changes have been made, and I think the majority of the staff is still here, but the biggest difference is the leadership of this agency lets staff do what they need to do. They trust the staff to work it. And I mean, I just made a little list of stuff. I mean, the makeup of the search committee, the makeup of the executive committee, getting the button on the license for discipline, the audit committee, letting ESAC and broker responsibility run wild sometimes. And, broker responsibility, I love them. I want them to start here and go to a funnel. They start here and they come down because there's just so many things they're passionate about, but they bring stuff to the staff and staff does it. And so that was my biggest takeaway is like, wow, there are some talented people here. And I will say this one, public, we're being recorded. I'll put our staff up against Texas Realtors now. I really will. I mean, I think we have great staff that really, that understands their mission and they understand the passion of the commissioners. Leslie Lerner brings stuff up and the staff scrubs it, says, what can we do? Can we do this? We looked at the enforcement matrix. So, I mean, the staff is here. Our job as a commission is to, I mean, Chelsea's ultimately responsible if the staff goes rogue, okay? Staff, she's ultimately responsible, and we're responsible for her. But it works, and so that was my biggest surprise was how great the staff was here. And the biggest difference is everybody is in the right seat on the bus doing a great job. This is a different agency. The respect is different, and so that's my takeaway on 3 and 4.
I think a good analogy from my standpoint is to watch the Astros and that team energy and spirit they have. That's what made the difference in them winning. The other team, if you watch them in the dugout, they didn't have that same energy. They didn't have that team spirit. They were there, but and I don't know if I think that goes back to, again, leadership. I read this morning that the manager's name is now Destiny instead of Dusty. Destiny, but I love that. But that's kind of where I see it coming from. It's that much difference. It's just the energy that you all have together, and even with TR and the other associations, y'all are building what is probably recognized, I suspect, at Arello as one of the best agencies in the nation.
Okay, well, that's been really helpful, and hopefully we've all heard everybody, and I'm gonna move to the next slide and just talk a little bit about TREC and what TREC does. I always think this is important to get out everywhere possible, right? And this is an interesting industry, regulatory body industry for me to walk into, because I had never seen such an active industry, just aside from TREC, right? I mean, there are 100 associations, there's the little ones, there's the big ones. Normally I think for advisory committees, it's a little bit like pulling teeth, but instead we're at, 160 applications for 4 positions, kind of a thing. And so that to me is really surprising, very cool. Sometimes I think, as the chair mentioned, that results in the this and not the this, but that's okay. Everybody has their ideas, and some stick and some don't. But I think we've gotten some really good stuff out of it. But I think important is, and Summer mentioned this a little bit, is that, we're in a strong position as a regulatory agency, as a licensing agency. And we are not an association. We have great relationships with them, and I think, we can bounce off each other, but truly TREC is, and you all know this, I'm sure you know it more now as commissioners, TREC is a state agency, right? It's a state licensing board. That's what it is. And so it does different things than the associations. It has a different interest, right? Because associations, they have an interest in their members. And some of that certainly extends to the consumer. I don't mean that it does not. But they have their interests. And sometimes, Chelsea says this, sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're not the same. But I think it's really important to remember that the commission, the agency exists to safeguard the public interest and to protect the consumer of real estate services, and that's all the services, right? So we think inspectors, we think brokers, we think agents. We've got the timeshare stuff. We lost residential service companies, but the whole of the industry. But the purpose is to protect the consumers, those that are using it. Who some of you think of as your clients, right? And then through education, licensing, and enforcement, the agency ensures the availability of qualified and ethical service providers, thereby facilitating the economic growth and opportunity across Texas. And that sounds a lot like what Chair Kesner said, which is that through having licensed and capable members in your industry who are held accountable through the enforcement process, that facilitates that economic growth and opportunity across Texas. And that's something that the economic growth and opportunity, that's included in a lot of different agencies' mission statements, because ultimately, right, what you're doing, the folks you're regulating, they're generating the economy in Texas. I think we all know real estate's pretty high up there, right? So we'll go to the next slide. You all know this, but I'm gonna cover it again because we're gonna go into that hat. So we've got 9 members, all of which are appointed by the governor. 6 members who are brokers, and I think that's important. The brokers bring an experience in the industries that TREC regulates. And so in order to even serve as a broker member on the commission, you have to have been engaged as a licensed broker as their major occupation for the 5 years preceding appointment. And so that's important, right? The requirements of this commission are that you, as a broker member, the industry, what's going on within the last 5 years. But also, I think what that ensures is you bring with you experience and understanding, because I don't do real estate, right? Chelsea doesn't do real estate. Our licensing staff doesn't do real estate. I'm just looking at, I see Denise. Our IT staff certainly doesn't do real estate. But you all do, and so you inform the policy of the agency with that experience. And then we've got 3 public members, and I think that's maybe probably one of the harder roles to serve, because depending on who the makeup of your board is, you may often be pushing back and saying, well, gosh, that seems like I've not seen it here, but that seems like you're really just trying to help out your business or your industry. And the potential for harm to the consumer is pretty significant there. And I think that is a hard one. I have seen public members who are like, I don't know, I just defer to those guys, they know what they're talking about. And it's like, oh, but yes, they do have that expertise, but to make sure that you're wearing that public member hat, which is, again, I think a hard hat to wear. Not an actual hard hat, but a hard hat to wear.
It's a heavy purple.
Yeah, there you go, that's right, that's right.
When you were on the other, like I said, the practitioner, on your other, so you've seen both sides of that.
Yeah, so you kind of like, and I, I always like to take the objectivity, right, and the impartial of when you hear the evidence, like, well, what does the evidence tell you, right? And so there's just judgment calls that you have to make. The one yesterday, for instance, I just didn't see the evidence cross over to where I thought that it was egregious enough for it to merit, So when you weigh the evidence, it's almost like a juror. It's like, well, where is it gonna fall? Not so much, well, the benefit on the result of whatever the decision
Right.
makes will benefit the public member. I'm a public member, so I'm gonna go that way.
Yeah.
I tend to weigh the objectivity of it all and impartiality. That's how I see things on either side. So that's where I come from.
I think that's great. And I thought yesterday's, watching that play out yesterday, we did record it, but I almost want to send it to other agencies and say, look at this deliberation, and there's disagreement, and it's not, I've seen disagreement get very tense sometimes, and it wasn't that, it was just like truly a conversation, and that, you let your point be known, how you felt from that public member perspective, and
Regardless of who it was.
that's right, yeah, that didn't matter to you, and I think that's super important too, right? You don't have that interest, that the brokers are there to someone to have that interest, right? To understand who's out there, what's been going on, but I think you're exactly right on that. Commissioner Miller, do you have something?
I did. I've just been enriched by the public members that have been serving while we've been serving. And I think of Renata getting to work with Mike Williams, who is a businessman by golly, and he knows how the budget has to work. And I can relate to the budget running my business, but at the state level, y'all got too many rules that the rest of us don't live by. And Jason's telling us that, yes, those 6 felonies, I'll never forget that, they could have been stacked. I didn't know what stacked felonies were. But with Ben, I will tell y'all, I just said, Ben, you're a CPA, you know about audits. I don't know beans about audit. What do we audit in our business, as far as, because it's so much financial stuff that they just offer a different wealth of information. And so I really appreciated them being here. That's true. And it's like, they don't have any real interest in this.
And I think you're right on the interaction between, I always say, if someone asks me a question, can we do this? And if my immediate thought is, yeah, of course you can, then I'm like, no, I bet there's a rule against it. Because there's always something that's like, actually, no, you can't do that because of this. And so, it's not always, but I'll just say like the random rules and safeguard, they're not random, they're all actually the result of
We just figured out how to buy water.
Yeah, right, that's exactly right. And so it's like, things are hard. I was just talking about, and thankfully I can hear the air. The process of getting the thermostat adjusted, it involved at least 4 people.
That's
And
appreciated.
yes, very
Very
much.
much appreciated.
Yeah, in particular, I will tell you, I'm really feeling that air right now.
Yeah.
So, and so I think sometimes that's probably a hard thing is, it's like, well, we can't because of this. And it's not, I never like being like, no. And I always wanna have a reason, but there's, as a licensing agency, as the government, we are held to a different standard than a business, and I think that can be hard. Like a hard thing to process, especially when you come from the private sector. I always think, wow, what's it like out there? Just do what you want. I know that's not totally true. So, okay, next, so the driving force of the commission is consumer protection, and we say that. And could you tie almost anything to consumer protection sort of loosely if you wanted to? Probably. I see it sometimes at the advisory committee level, like, oh yeah, and consumer protection, and it's like, okay, but also maybe that idea was not rooted in consumer protection if you had to tag it on at the end, right? Like what, and that's easy to do, because I think when you come from the industry, you are also thinking about what you see in the industry and the things that irritate you. But as a commissioner, this is that hat thing. Are you looking at it through the eyes of consumer protection or as something that irritates you because you got to deal with it? And sometimes those two things are totally tied together, 100%. Sometimes they're not.
Well, for my 50 years in the business before I got here, I thought, okay, the commission is here for consumer protection. It had to be a consumer that complained. And now I am preaching to every group that I happen to run into. Y'all, if you see a realtor doing something wrong, report it to the commission. Stand up for our industry. Make us better. That's what our job is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I looked at 50 years ago. I was gonna make this industry better.
Well,
And I tried.
and particularly, a licensee, non-realtor, this is the place you have to go, because the association isn't going to.
And they don't wanna bother. They get mad about our transactions, but they don't get mad enough to go through a process of complaining that often.
That's right.
And I would say, get your seller to complain. Where now I realize we shouldn't complain. We can't.
Sounds great. Okay, so I just I typed these out more just as being points, and I'm not, the chair had asked that we talk about this, and I think it is a really important part that I'm gonna really try and cover too, like I said, with the advisory committees and especially with new commissioners as they come on. We really wanna make that onboarding process meaningful, and not just like, here's 1,000 things you need to file, and you have 2 days to do it, which is what it feels like. I'm guessing from I'm looking at the folks who recently joined, because I think you guys joined like right at the time where like you also had to do your statements and all of the stuff. That's always gonna be there. So as commissioners, you serve as the outward facing policy maker. So to Commissioner Lerner's point, you're not in the day-to-day, right? You can be to the extent, there's things that you have an interest in and all of that, but truly what the commission does is it's the outward facing group. So you're the commission. We talk about I always divide it into the commission and the agency when I'm speaking, just to make it clear, right? Because there's some things about us that are just sort of state agency. And then we talk about this, we're governed by a commission, and we just talked about the makeup of that commission. So you're the outward facing face of the agency. You are the commission, and you are the policymaker. So the bigger issues, not the, we need to order new chairs for this conference room because they don't lean back. And it's not that so much as it's, what do we want to talk about? We want to talk about broker responsibility. We want to get that message out there. File a complaint, right? That's been a big message that you all have let us know is something you want to get out there. Communications, improve those communications, get followers, get them out whichever way you can that's the most effective, that kind of a thing. So the rules you adopt, and I know that sometimes listening to those rules is like, ugh. I say that because I'm up there and I'm reading them, and I think no one wants to listen to me read 17 different form numbers. But we do try and consolidate the summaries. But those rules that you adopt, that's what the industry has to follow. Those are their laws, right? The word rule to me always seems like it's not quite enough. It's not it's not statute, but it's kind of the same thing, right? So those rules are really important. They're the detail work of the agency. So we've got big statutes that form us, and then we've got the rules that usually what your industry is held to.
But the rules are also a mechanism for us to help protect the public without waiting for the legislature,
That's right.
like the 3-hour contracts.
It's
That's
like
right.
feet on the bones.
Right,
Bones
exactly.
to the statutes.
So we need those rules so we can be a little quicker than the legislature would probably want us to be.
And when they don't work, you can pivot a lot faster. Than legislation. We'll talk about this a little bit, but legislating slowly, I mean, you want to be very thorough in your rulemaking, and we are. I mean, you have to be, but getting a legislative change versus making a rule change, two very different processes. And then to that end, to the stakeholder input. Now, I will say there is this is similar to what I was saying before about all the associations and the environment. Like, there's good stakeholder input here. People have opinions in the real estate industry. And I think that's super helpful. I think it's very important. I mean, those contract form comments, we talked about that yesterday, right? We received so many because people use those forms every day and they like or don't like, right? And then, so the funds you commit, right, where the money goes, the policies you implement as it relates to licensing, education, and enforcement, those are our 3 core functions. They all have that statewide impact. So it's not just in this building, in this city, which I think sometimes state agencies can forget. It's statewide. And it impacts people that are performing real estate brokerage services in Pampa. I'm going to go with all my old oil and gas cities. In Pampa, in Midland, in Houston, in Corpus, in Beaumont, right? I mean, that's a pretty big range, and your rules encompass all of our different type of license holders. And what you do impacts that, right? So I talk about this at the advisory committee level. Think about every license holder and not just what you do or what you think you see. I think you want to be cognizant of your majorities and what's out there, but we really, when we're talking about being the government and licensing, we want to think about every type of license holder and what that would mean, especially as we know there's a big push to remove barriers to entry and allow for different types of business models that fall within our regulations. But that's how you also facilitate that economic growth, is contemplating all types of license holders. Okay, so I know you know this, but you all are basically celebrities in your industry, and I say that lightly, but I think it's true, right? You are the public figures. You're that outward-facing body. You get asked to speak at numerous events. You carry that name, commissioner. If you use it in your title, like in your email block, right? That means something. And so you're a public figure. What you say carries weight, and I will say that is true even after you leave the commission. And so you want to be mindful of that, right? You were one of 9 that were selected, chosen by the governor, that kind of thing. You've served, you know it. So the positions you take in open meetings send a message. I won't belabor that point because I think we've talked about it pretty extensively yesterday. And what we saw yesterday was the commission taking a position on a topic that has been very important. And we talked about that both ways. The position was taken both ways. That conversation was had in public. And as a full commission, I think that's probably your most powerful stance you can take as a commission. And then, but that also means the words you say at meetings, the words you say to consumers and to members of the industry can carry a weight. So this is where that 2-hat role comes in. If you are still, I think almost every broker is still engaged. I think actually you are all still engaged. But if you're out there and you're at an association meeting and I can't what's the name of your company again, Chair Kesner? The Edge? The Edge is the worst. I mean, I don't know who
You
they
probably get
hire.
some votes for that.
Right, I don't know who they hire. I don't know if they have ever looked at the rules. I am pretty sure no one there is licensed because they could have passed an exam to save their life, okay? If just Steve, well, Steve's a little bit different. If Steve's son is saying that, whatever. Okay, he really doesn't like the Edge. But if Commissioner Wilkinson is saying that, it's like, oh, there must be a bigger problem. Like, she probably has some insight. And then the Edge is like, is there a reason that this public official is taking a position against my company? And I don't want them hearing the cases on my company. I object to that. In fact, I think I have not had a fair hearing because if she is saying that at these associations, what's she saying to enforcement staff? What's she saying to other people? No way. And how dare she say that? I'm taking her to court. I've had a drop in my business. I've had a potential client come and say, well, I was gonna work with you, but no. And so that, I think, that's hard because you're still in the business, you're doing that stuff. So I think we just, Chair had asked me to really talk about that public role, and that's true in speaking engagements, that's true on business models. And so just wearing that commissioner hat of, I really don't like this new thing. Okay, well, you can not like it, but as a commissioner, what does saying that mean? Or, the opposite of that. You know who I love? I love the Edge. They are the best. You should not work with anyone else in El Paso. Like, terrible idea. Just then you're really promoting a specific business. So you just want to think about that.
That's stuff to tell your mother.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
anybody in there.
But, and not only commissioners, but even the advisory
Oh, big
groups.
time.
And I've listened to several and things are said that should not be. Yeah, so we just have to be very careful.
Yeah, 100%. I think actually you see it more at the advisory committee level, and I don't think it's intent. I don't think there's negative intent in any of this. I just think it's one of those things that once you take a position, you've got to be, you gotta be a little bit more careful. I get, I even think about it sometimes. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, like my agent's post because what if somehow and I'm like, nobody cares that I liked their post. But you think about that, right?
Well, we were sitting in an Arello meeting and they were throwing names out and we were just looking at each other like,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, oh yeah, this is a huge problem.
Yeah.
This can't happen, and it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable.
we should leave.
Yeah, pack your things. Yeah, but it is a little bit stressful because you're like, oh, are we naming the name of that company in this meeting? And everyone's talking, like, this feels, and it wasn't, it was someone else, but it's like, yikes. Okay, so I think I've covered this. I've covered this. So I think, in favor or against, there's perceived favoritism, there's loss of trust by the consumer and your regulated industries. If they think you're gonna say things about them, you're gonna lose that trust, and that trust, I think, from hearing what I've heard today, has taken some time to build. And so we don't ever wanna lose that.
So, there may be situations where, names start getting mentioned, and at that point, probably the most prudent thing to do is, okay, let's stop this and change directions as far as the discussion is concerned. But what is the commissioner's responsibility with respect to, well, now I've got information that could lead to, and I guess this goes back to the whole enforcement thing. I've got information that really should be taken up by the entire commission with respect to disciplinary action or possible disciplinary action based on information I heard at a tabletop meeting that would affect,
What a great question.
Yep.
how as commissioners, and it'd probably be more the professional people as opposed to myself, but those are delicate situations. And well, I've got information now that is actionable.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it will depend on the topic, right? So I can think of one that I'm not gonna specifically name here, where there's actually a conversation going on amongst like the associations, possibly the AG, just kind of, hey, this has been brought to our attention and we can't quite pinpoint it, but let's have a conversation about it in terms of like, I can't even remember who originally brought it, it was something from advisory committee, but like we're talking about it and we're seeing like, okay, we talked to Mike, is this something that's actionable under our statute? We don't know yet. I don't know that it is. Okay, well, where else could it potentially go? Who else could it impact? Is title talking about this? Is the associations talking about like, so we can have that conversation if something is brought to us as staff. But my first response to that is always going to be, okay, can we get a complaint filed? Is the person that you heard talking around the table willing to file a complaint? Or is their client willing to file a complaint because they were the person who was, directly harmed and the agent doesn't want to file the complaint for whatever reason? And I think we're always going to encourage that because you want your enforcement process to be fully transparent. And I talked about this a little bit in the memo. I think that if there is something that reaches a level of consumer harm and we give it over to enforcement and we say, here's the information that we have, based on your opinion, could you do something with this? Do you have the evidence to do something with this? I think of unlicensed activity. That was one that was also brought up quite a bit. Can we take action and have a good case and look at our evidence? You don't want to be out there just like willy-nilly initiating complaints where you don't have the evidence, but I think a true thorough analysis of what's going on, what's the level, is this the approach you want to take from enforcement? And I think you all inform that decision making. I mean, you direct us. But I would say first step probably is to reach out to Chelsea and me about it. And we can usually figure out.
So does TREC initiate its own complaints?
It can, yep, we do. And we're actually gonna talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
We try and do it we certainly do it in specific circumstances. Like all of our criminal backgrounds are self-initiated, right? We tend to do it where we hold the evidence. So if someone writes us a bad check, if an education does an audit, they'll refer over issues that they see, and Mike can speak to it better, but that's typically where we will hold the evidence. And that's pretty common, and we'll get into this in just a minute, it's actually the next topic, but we also have got to pay attention to our role as the licensing board and having a really transparent enforcement process and giving everybody their due process. So we don't want to step into the shoes of the complainant as our MO. That's been our position.
And if you think about, like, if you assume that a complaint is going to reach the point of like a trial, like it's so, or trial-like, then you have to have evidence, and that has to come from a source. You can't just rely on hearsay.
Sure.
So if we have the evidence, then we're basically the complainant. You wronged us, or we're kind of in those shoes.
Right.
But if someone just tells us something has gone wrong, then we don't have what we need to essentially hand to the prosecutor.
Sure.
So
a court case might be an example of that. You see something posted in the Texas Tribune that so-and-so realtor was indicted for a $15 million fraud, right? Then that's actionable for the commission, right?
Well, once it's been through the process.
once they're convicted.
Yes, and people do let us know when they see that. But what we do is we'll receive that information and we'll say, okay, actually, not yet. Like they haven't been to, yeah, that's right. And so we've got to wait, and that makes, gosh, you've probably seen it or gotten emails, that makes people so mad. But then it's like, well, but they haven't been found guilty yet, right? And what's the presumption in this country? That's right. That's exactly right. And so if we're out there pulling people's licenses because they've been indicted and then they're found not guilty, it's like, oh gosh, well, yeah.
For sure, you have to wait for the adjudication. Yeah.
And I know you know that, I'm just throwing it out there.
I know that our advisory committees are primarily made up of realtors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of you, especially Abby, who's worked for the Texas Association, know what the code of ethics says. And maybe just a friendly reminder when you hear names of companies thrown on. I mean, I mentioned Abby yesterday. I use her in training all the time because she's an icon as far as I'm concerned. And so it would never be knocking her, but we are not allowed to knock other realtors. Just kind of slap their hand and remind them of that. I urge staff to take that initiative.
Yeah, and I think we will, and I think we do, like, what I wanna try and do, we'll have a conversation in a little bit actually, is let's talk practices and acts versus names.
That's a great point.
And that's why, like, I love using the edge, right? And because you all know, but you know, it can even be as simple as Realtor A, well, not Realtor, I'm sorry. Agent A.
Licensee.
Broker B.
Licensee.
Yeah, license holder.
It gets a little tricky. I mean, we're talking, one of the agenda items later involves, when you have work of a sales agent with someone other than their own broker. Well, one way in which that happens is through expansion teams. Well, expansion teams is a term of art that one broker uses. It's a huge brokerage, but it's one brokerage. So how do we unpack that issue regardless of what we're calling it? So we try to be real sensitive to that just because we're not trying to attack that brokerage. We're just trying to unpack the gray area that is that topic.
But business practices can be looked at. We looked at wholesaling. We're looking at this 40-year listing agreement. We're looking at transaction coordinators, expansion teams, whatever you want to call them. But you just have to look at the practice. Is that hurting the consumer, not the person behind the practice?
Yeah, and we can do that. I mean, we've had, I've had them brought to me. In fact, I've got one sitting on my desk that I'm trying to figure out how to change the, not the name to, but how am I going to present this in a way that's not like, well, it's clearly them, but like, hey, is this a bigger problem? Is this an issue under our statute and rules? And that is always a fair question to ask. Because people come up, I mean, you all know this, people come up with ideas all the time. And anytime there's a new one, we usually get about 4 or 5 emails. It's like, have you seen this? And usually my answer is, no, I haven't. I'm not in that world, so thanks for sending it. And we'll take a look and see if it runs afoul, and maybe it's a bigger conversation. And sometimes it's like, what's the answer I always hear? The market will take care of that one. Right? And that's fine, we're still gonna look at it, but I think you're starting to see less creative ideas. Okay, so I think I've covered this. You create the policy, you're the public face. What's the next? Got real repetitive in this, I'm sorry. So this is the 2 hats, and so I believe this is my last training slide?
Yeah.
Except for the part about the handouts, yeah, okay. So let's finish with just 2 questions. I know I've taken up a lot of your time, and I hope it's been useful. We only do it once a year, so hopefully, it was bearable. But how do you distinguish between the 2 hats that you wear? Like, what are some sort of tips, tricks? Because I'm going to use these when I talk to the new folks, and I'm going to use these with the advisory committees. And I think it's helpful for people to hear from folks who've been here at different times. How do you distinguish between your 2 hats?
Well, I think for me, it's easy because I was brought up in the association, and we just have a general rule in our office. You never walk into the association with your name tag. You never walk in with your company logo on your shirt. Because if you're there to do association business, you're association business. So that was driven into me years and years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think I do the same thing here. Strategies, yesterday, thank God I didn't have to spell scrupulous or meticulous, but, I talk about it, and the whole time I'm thinking, you know what? If I ever have a complaint, I am setting myself up because, but it was, in my opinion, and I always tell myself, did you do what was best to protect the consumer? And I think I did. And even though I'm thinking, wow, I would hate to be, we do 800 transactions a year. We're going to mess one up, and they can probably take what I said yesterday Michael do like this, and use it against me, but that was our job, my job yesterday. And so it's not easy, it's really not. And sometimes I leave and I get on the computer and I send email back to staff saying, hey, let's re-examine this, or hey, let's look at this. But I think you have to you have to separate the two. And I think I do it well most of the time. There's times where I probably don't, but you have to make a conscious effort, like not wearing your logo, not wearing your name tag. That's easy, but I think it helps set it up.
See, that's the standard of excellence that you wish everybody in the profession.
And we're not gonna be there, but you can strive for it every day.
I see it too in the CPA world. It's like, they didn't do what? And, you know, and then they come in and underbid you by, you know, big difference, and they get the job, and that's because they're not doing the work.
Yeah.
And,
You never get paid for more than your worth.
yeah.
I
It's
would
frustrating, definitely.
I would agree with the chair. Yesterday was a real good example of wearing two hats. It was a tough one to wear those two hats.
For sure. Anybody else have anything?
I think, the two hats, it's not just I've learned a lot through geographic competence and having to train on it and all that, that I don't have the same problems that El Paso has or Houston. And Hurricane Harvey changed all our rules. It changed the legislation. It changed so much. And right now we're dealing with drought all over the state of Texas. And we have to look at, it's not just what affects us as the broker and what I'm dealing with in North Texas. What's going on all over the state. And I think that's what you've gotta have a broader perspective when you get here.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna, I will play this portion of the meeting back as I draft these new trainings and move forward with the orientations. So this will be real fast. We wanted to, as part of the training, I did what I do, which is, wouldn't it be great if we had this day? I'm pretty sure Summer can do it. And then she did, right? So we tried to give her, I just want to give her all the credit in the world because Steve is here. He can testify to my ability to do anything on the computer. It's not great. But we wanted to make some resources for you, and all this information is in your guide, but sort of a cheat sheet, a quick reference point. We've printed them out, but you also have copies of them in your materials, the ones I sent over. So we've got sort of a quick cheat sheet on the Open Meetings Act, which is always the thing that I think gets drilled in initially, and it sounds so scary and hard, and it is scary and hard. It's just, there's a lot of rules, but it's so important. So we wanted to cover, what does it require? Why is it important? Here's a big one. What can we talk about in executive session? What needs to go, can we take a vote? Just the sort of the quick points on the Open Meetings Act. This can also serve as a little bit of a resource for you too, in terms of when you get calls from folks or, then if somebody calls you and is like, well, I've spoken to 4 other commissioners on this and they said, and then you're immediately like, oh, I've got to go. Right? Because then all of a sudden you've got somebody who's shopping for an official commission answer and there's cases on this and it's a real nightmare. And this is why we kind of drill it in, but I thought this could be helpful. And then the other document that looks like a little road, a road through the year, and I just love it. It's a year in the life of the TREC commissioner. We tried to cover what it looks like in the, basically the course of a year of a life. But also like when we have advisory committee meetings, generally the commission meetings, what's gonna happen. So like February, we always have elections, that kind of a thing. We put in there the personal financial statement, which we always try and send an email about, and I get real panicked every year and think that I've missed sending you the email because we don't get a notice from the Ethics Commission So we just kind of calendared of like, don't forget to send that reminder email. But I think everyone in this room is like, oh yes, that thing, we've got to do it. And if we don't do it, then we get a fine and have I done, that kind of thing. So tried to put that in there. So I thought this could be a helpful, just especially I think as we do orientation for the new commissioners, if there's anything in there you think we've missed. But just wanted to have something for you all that's a little bit more helpful and less cumbersome.
Yeah, this is really good.
Okay, good.
For somebody new.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be very helpful.
You already have dominated.
Right.
Yeah.
As a pro.
I'm going, well, this is great.
Yeah.
I need this right now.
Yeah, so you can put it next to your computer, laminate it as a paper placemat, it's the perfect size.
Does the staff want to have all the committee meetings right before this meeting? Does that put pressure on y'all?
Well, we think of our work life as being in this quarterly cycle. You have a commission meeting, you have a little bit of recovery from the commission meeting, kind of deep breath. And then a ramp up to committee season. And then that has to be early enough to where whatever comes out of the committee, staff can kind of tie that with a bow and then prepare for the commission meeting. And then you have a commission meeting and you have them. So it's that kind of cycle. So a little bit of spread out is good when you have all of the advisory committee meetings like in 1 week or something. It's a little bit brutal.
That's what I'm seeing then.
Some of it's just scheduling.
Sometimes it's a little bit easier too to do, it just depends on what's happening, but we've actually tried to schedule them earlier now so that there's more of a, I think before it was like a 2-week window and now we've tried to schedule it to like a 3-week window between when the last advisory committee meeting is to the, but that eats into your relief time. Your relief time is also the time where you're like, oh yeah, I need to look at those 17 things that I said I would look at after the commission meeting.
And it's when you take a summer vacation, or,
Yeah.
you have these pretty short windows where
Well,
staff
y'all
are
have worked
free.
it out, but I just thought I know it's hectic.
It is, I think we could look at the more we focus the groups on what they're looking at. I will say this, if the advisory committees know what they're supposed to be looking at, those meetings are, I think, a lot more productive and they're a lot less chaotic in the moment. So, we usually try and meet with the chair sort of towards the beginning of the year of like, what do you want, what's something you want ESAC to look at this year? What's something, because the more we can focus it, because when it's like, what about this and that, and I have this idea and that idea, and then you're just like, I don't know, we're in, like, we've got a couple hours today, I've never heard this issue presented before, this is super, and then it's like, well, let's have a follow-up and a working group, and so I think that, you all, if you have thoughts for these committees and you could direct them, like, if you look at broker lawyer committee, like, there's not a lot of work that, on our end, that goes into prepping for those meetings because they have their tasks. I mean, that's not to, afterwards, there's certainly a ton of work, right, because of the contract forms themselves. But like, they know what they're looking at. They're very organized. They're a little bit of a machine. So even though that meeting was 8 hours, like, they ran it, right? And we got to help the advisory committees a little bit with that. But I think the more we can give them topics and remind them of things, then you start to see that funnel down.
Yeah, broker audit is a great example because the scope, what they do is very limited. I mean, there's a lot in it, but it's limited, and I think that was a great example.
So now that the rule review, the
We're with you, we know.
Yeah,
So
that's like something off the table, right, for these within 4 years.
Yeah, quad is what I
Well,
call it.
kind of, what we really want to do, we'll see where we are with this, is have a little bit of quadrennial rule review, I have to say it very slowly, happening every year, so that every 4 years, it's not such a heavy lift, it's just more of a dribble. But we've got to kind of figure out what that might look like.
But they accept it.
Like a rolling.
When you do that for the state, right?
Yes, there's a rule that says you've got to look at your rules every 4 years. So if you do it on a kind of an ongoing cycle, then you hit every rule every 4 years.
Because they accept it that way.
Kind of like CE, you can take.
Yeah, and I will say this, that was a tremendous undertaking this year, and I would say 80% credit to Abby and 20% credit to the division directors who all
Yeah.
really got in there on their stuff.
On the heels of a legislative session.
Right, that's exactly right, but I think a lot of the like ticky-tacky changes got made. And so I think in terms of like cleanup, we feel really good. And so I think that effort will be rewarded if we go to a rolling, that it will be less, why is this administrator and not that kind of stuff. I think we got a lot of the old stuff cleaned up and out, the residency stuff, just that kind of stuff. So I'm very hopeful that we will, enjoy the bounty of that work. Okay, I'm gonna hopefully just stop talking for a long time and bring my temperature down. Summer.
Thank you. Alright, so how are y'all doing? Do you need a break or anything? I'll be pretty short, but do you want to take a break?
Let's assess after, do you need a break?
Well,
Want a
I
break?
don't know how short it is.
What's short, 10 minutes?
2 minutes. Yeah.
Oh,
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Oh, we're taking a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay, 5 minutes.
14, Summer Mandel, give us a legislative update.
Yeah, so, since Tony is out, I'll be just running through some of the stuff that's gone on since we last met at the workshop, the legislative priorities and where they stand. So first, in good news, the Inspector Recovery Fund repeal that y'all heard about yesterday that the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee supports, that is actually with a House sponsor and a Senate sponsor. So hopefully that's with Ledge Council, but that's going along well. We also have a few other odds and ends. So the raising statutory limits for the real estate recovery trust account, removing statutory language establishing requirements for non-residents, and that, if you recall, is from sunset recommendations. Eliminating the study guide requirement, we're doing that on the board side as well. And the broker education experience, giving the commission rulemaking authority to establish those hours by rule. And then clarifying the statute to ensure TREC can collect a fee for Texas A&M's research center, real estate research center at the initial and renewal applications. And that was filed in the 87th and didn't pass for a variety of other things going on, a variety of reasons. And so we're still reviewing the draft language for that, but we have stakeholder support for all of that legislation. So, which I wanted to mention too. So of course we've had a really good, healthy relationship with Texas Realtors and talked about some of the stuff we're looking at. We also had the Texas Land Title Association come to our office a couple weeks ago and chatted with them about wholesaling, and they are looking forward to seeing where that goes. So we're trying to meet with everybody and make sure we're all on the same page. So with wholesaling, moving forward with requiring statutory disclosure to sellers. As you know, buyers are already required to have that disclosure. Also still reviewing the draft language for that. And then we tabled one initiative, which was eliminating the real estate inspector license mid-level for incoming applicants. And the reason we tabled that is because during the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee meeting, when we were discussing it, they decided that they want to put the brakes on that and they want to further explore the implications of doing that. And so this action might be something that comes up for the 2025 legislative session, but they just want to say, wait a minute, let's make sure we really dot our I's and cross our T's before moving forward with it.
We started kind of asking some questions and adding to the legislative ask, and at this late date, that those additions hadn't been vetted.
Yeah,
So it's like a pause.
And let me add, if you have a chance, maybe go back and listen to that. Tony did an awesome job bringing some questions up about the full impact and implications on it made him go back and kind of rethink it, and it was a very good discussion, and immediately I thought great, and then when it was all said and done, it was good to table it. It was a whole lot deeper than it seemed when it first started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give Tony credit because he asked some questions, said, what about this? And so kudos to him.
Yeah, and I think you're right, it was a good discussion and just a good reminder for all of us really when it comes to this legislative stuff. it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, because this was actually filed in the 87th, and if it had passed, then we would have what essentially they're not sure they want. So I think that's just a good example of why we have to have these conversations and make sure we're checking in with people who are affected by all of them, so all those changes. Do y'all have any questions?
I've got one question on the broker point system. Run back over that real quick. That is to where the point system would be determined by the rule and not so much statute?
Right, exactly.
Well,
So there were two options for this one. I'm gonna let you
No.
explain it so that you're.
The hours, the education, so this is the education hour, so the points, the active experience points that already lives in rule.
Okay,
This is the education requirements, and so it's the BRWG recommendation, to reduce the number of hours of education and increase the amount of experience, and the ultimate thought on the best way to handle that so that the commission can do the toggle. We already have the experience, the ability to determine what constitutes active experience in rulemaking, but the education hours are laid out in statute. So the way the bill is currently drafted is it allows the commission to have rulemaking authority to determine the education hours components currently in statute, but with a cap. And I think that cap is at 60, and I'm not gonna get into like the way that course hours are done and semester, it becomes like a whole thing. But basically we took that BRWG recommendation to lower that, but by getting it in rule, if it doesn't work, we can continue to toggle it. You're gonna get more stakeholder input on what is that appropriate amount, what works, and to the extent, if it had been lowered in statute and then for some reason we weren't able to raise the experience as a result, right? Because let's say it just doesn't get approved, no one likes it, we're stuck with legislation that we may never be able to change. So the solution has been to see if we can get that in rulemaking authority, similar to what we have for experience.
right.
And there's a cap in there, so it's not just full-blown power to do that. And we talked with the association, and it's been a big topic at BRWG. We received public comment on this topic, I think, just about every BRWG meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so just to remind y'all, early filing is on Monday. So we'll be monitoring and seeing what's coming up with that. And moving forward, we'll just be giving y'all updates on the status of stuff and how it's moving along. And, once session starts, it can get crazy. So if you have questions about what's going on, don't hesitate to ask. But we'll try to keep y'all updated on everything.
Tony and Summer will begin sending you like a big document with all the bills that have been filed and summaries of like what's included and where they are in the process, kind of as those things come up. And then, we're not in a position during session to convene this group to say, what do you think, in time to then be able to provide that feedback. So if you see something on that list, or you know of something that is of interest to you that we need to know about, and you have strong opinions for, just bring it, just call us. Because things move way too fast during session to get, that's really what we've done in this interim, is to take your temperature on things and then act accordingly.
All right,
All right, thanks, y'all.
good job.
Thank you, Cindy.
All right, who's taking?
So next is agenda item 4, we're back to Vanessa. Oh, good.
Only for a little bit. I know. Okay. I'm gonna stand again just so I can see everybody. Okay. Exciting. Okay, so this agenda item is before you today as the result of the enforcement committee who met in October, right? that meeting was at the request of Commissioner Lerner, who has done some digging on some topics. I wanted to give a little bit of background, and I provided this in my memo to you all, which is that Commissioner Lerner filed a complaint, and as part of in the role of being a complainant, she saw firsthand what that experience is like. And one of the things that happened is when she received the complaint letter, I'll call it, like the opening letter, she was CC'd. It's a letter that goes to the respondent, and her name was in the CC, and she was surprised by this, which is fair, because she didn't expect to be CC'd in that initial notice. And so, we did some digging on this, and looks like there was, through Sunset, there was a recommendation that was made. The recommendation that ultimately resulted in a statutory change. So that relates to the protection of complainant identifying information. And so there's a lot of discussion during the Sunset process about complainant identifying information and whether the commission should be protecting that information. And then there's the inevitable discussion as it relates to that of due process concerns. We are the government. And when we talk about taking somebody's license away, there's due process concerns with that, meaning if someone's trying to take your occupational licensing from you, if the licensing agency is doing that, you have a right to examine the evidence against you, to cross-examine witnesses, to full transparency to know what is happening. And that's because you have an enhanced property interest in your license. And so that conversation happened during Sunset. I was not here for that conversation, but just in looking back through the notes. But the statute that resulted from that, the change to 1101 is 2051, and it says that the commission shall, to the extent possible, protect the identifying information of the complainant by redacting it from the complaint notice form. I believe that's what I'm paraphrasing from the complaint notice sent to a respondent, okay? And so, and we Chelsea and I and Mike, we all looked at, there was a bit of I think it was an SOP in place that tried to address what I think the discussions were of, well, it's really not, in most cases, because these are so transactional in nature, it's pretty easy to figure out who filed what, though not always. And so the process was that if they didn't think they could protect that information for very long, then they didn't. And if you look at the statute, that's not what the statute says. The statute says it's got to be redacted from that initial complaint notice form. And so Commissioner Lerner was 100% right. That should not happen, and that does not happen anymore. I understand where the interpretation came from. It was a past one. And I think we all know, because we all talk about how, well, they're going to figure it out, because if you're talking about a specific transaction, it's usually about 4 people.
The parties involved.
Yeah, that's right. So and so that that's been changed. So the CC in the line now just shows complainant, and that is more in line with statute. And that was, when Sunset made the recommendation, they consider that recommendation to be fully implemented with that statute, which is pretty specific. But I think what this did, and I'm gonna turn this over to Commissioner Lerner very shortly, and to the rest of the enforcement committee, because this was a bigger discussion that happened. There were some outstanding questions, and the thought was, let's bring it to workshop, and I think that's great. Are there other things that could be done to look at, complainant identifying information, staff initiated complaints as a possible option there, and then some streamlining ideas and low-level offenses. There was also an outstanding question that Commissioner Hartgraves had asked that we put on here, which is what happens when staff has evidence of wrongdoing that's brought to them, but they don't have a signed complaint. And so that question was asked sort of towards the end, and I did some digging on that and really tried to walk through our process on that. But in the interim, so during that meeting, Commissioner Lerner had given us I showed a PowerPoint that she had created of some research she had done. And in the interim, she did a survey sort of all the state commissions, real estate commissions, to see what they do with those three topics. So the first one being the do you conceal identity of complainants? No, I'm sorry, do you self-initiate complaints? Do you conceal the identity of the complainant? And then how do you handle low-level offenses generally, and do you conceal the identity in those? And so she got back some responses. And so I provided you with like all the information, which is a lot. And then I tried to summarize those findings. That's what you've got in the charts. Just hopefully as like a quick reference guide. And obviously, again, I didn't create those charts. I also did a little bit of digging. I think sometimes when you speak to state government folks, when you start talking about confidentiality of information and conceal, you guys start to get an open records mind. And I know I do too, right? Because I've been in that business for a long time. And so I think sometimes some of these got answered from a Public Information Act perspective and not necessarily yeah, because when I would go to I did go to some of the websites and I saw, they actually have language to the contrary. No, this will be turned over in the investigation. They have a right to this, et cetera. But there was one who, they allowed for totally anonymous complaints. I have not looked at their legislation on that. Anyways, I tried to summarize it I started doing it for myself, just so that I could have like a quick grasp on like, oh, New Hampshire said this and that. And then I thought, this might be helpful just to have as a reference point in the meeting. And I provided you with a memo that outlines the legal issues that were discussed in that enforcement committee meeting. And then I maybe covered a little bit of what's in here, of the survey results, just because I had those at the time. And so I am happy to walk through that memo, the highlights of that memo if you want. I tried to put sort of a conclusion on each of the issues to sum it up, so that you don't have to listen, I hope you read it all and loved it, but there's also some summaries, and I am happy to answer any questions, heading direction. I can let you know sort of where our statutory bounds are. Mike is here to talk about, their processes. Every case they open with an eye towards SOA, and the laws that we're held to under, one, due process, but also like APA laws, what they have to take to SOA, the authentication of evidence, chain of custody, all this stuff that I never have to deal with, but that Mike's group deals with daily, and they know. But I want to turn it over to Commissioner Lerner because she had this experience, and there was a real result from that. I mean, I think she found something that is super important, and I'm glad we've corrected it. But also just to open it up to you to bring, what we want to talk about, what you all want to talk about. I will be here as a resource to answer questions. That's it.
Okay, so to keep my thoughts straight, I kind of was just writing everything down, and I know staff and other people get real frustrated at my inquisitive mind and pushing for answers and that kind of stuff. I feel it, I know it. So I kind of just wrote everything to kind of sum up what we're doing. So I said, on April 29, 2021, I signed an oath of office that states that I solemnly swear or affirm, sorry, my voice has been going today, that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of the Real Estate Commission of the State of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. I don't take it lightly. When thinking about TREC's duties, the word protect comes to mind. We are to protect the consumer. Quite honestly, TREC has rules and laws that should help protect all parties of a real estate transaction. Protect is defined as to make sure that somebody or something is not harmed, injured, damaged, etc. That's our role as TREC commissioners and staff that is subsequently guided by our decisions. Protection can come in the form of education, experience, rules, laws, enforcement, etc. Today, we're here to discuss the complaint system and how the rules or laws are interpreted by those enforcing them. Are they protecting all involved? The enforcement memo we received last week states Commissioner Lerner experienced a scenario where she filed a complaint and her identifying information was revealed in the agency's opening letter on the CC line. Since that statement is a vague summary of what actually happened, I'd like to quickly walk you through the whole scenario. In September, I received an offer on a home I had listed. Page 10 contained a business entity name and license number that was not listed on the TREC website. I sent the information to Mike Malloy and was told the business entity license has expired in 2012. It was further stated that it would be best if I submitted a written complaint since it was deemed as unlicensed activity. He went on to say, I would expect the extent of the involvement of the person filing the complaints to be minimal. I took that to mean if the enforcement office could handle it and I would most likely be kept out. I filed the complaint and the respondent received a letter on September 20th. That same day, I received a hostile call from the broker of the company. The broker happens to be the husband of the respondent. When I finally hung up due to his behavior, he called back. I didn't answer. Needless to say, I had not received a letter and did not have any idea the respondent was notified with all documentation. The next day, Chelsea called to assure me enforcement had not done anything wrong. I was told they are following the correct protocol and I shouldn't worry about what others think or say. I should feel good that I turned it in. When I mentioned the fear of retaliation may outweigh the benefit, I was told I didn't have to be the police. I was also asked what my motivation was. My motivation has always been the same. The governor appointed me to the position for a reason. It was not to sit back and be complacent. I want to better my profession, the real estate industry, by making sure licensees are properly educated and trained, and the commission's rules and laws, processes and procedures are working as intended to adequately protect all involved. And most of all, it is very important to me to fulfill my oath of office. I thought about my conversation with Chelsea for several days and requested an enforcement meeting. I'm unsure if any of you listened to the enforcement meeting, but I'm sure it could be provided to you. On September 22nd, prior to the enforcement meeting, I was asked what I would like included on the agenda. I sent a list of 3 things. TREC self-initiated complaints, Sunset Commission's recommendation, require the Real Estate Commission and Appraiser Board to maintain complaints confidentiality when possible. This was later incorporated into Senate Bill 524 and how to streamline the complaint process. On September 30th, Chelsea sent an email stating, we will redact the identifying information of the complainant in the complaint and say only CC complainant in the letter. This does not mean the identity of the complainant will remain confidential, but it will delay the process and comply with our statute requiring such, Occupations Code 1101.2051D-1. That was changed as part of the sunset recommendations you have mentioned previously. Is this enough to protect all parties of a complaint? Will this process deter people from filing a complaint? Is this the way TREC is interpreting the Occupation and Administrative Code correct? Since the enforcement meeting last month, I have contacted other Texas agencies and members of Arello. Some are designing some summaries that were sent last week. The full unredacted responses were sent as well. If you would like, I have also prepared a spreadsheet of every state's complaint rules or laws, if the information was available. Going back to the oath we took and our duty to protect, I can't deny that I am inquisitive and ask a lot of questions. I want to know how people come to their conclusions. If you tell me that something can't be done, I want to know why and where you got your information. I will research topics that we are discussing are pertinent to our industry in general. I will make calls to other states or agencies. I will read other states' rules, make spreadsheets, listen to agent and consumer concerns, or spend hours educating myself so I can make knowledgeable decisions for the 200,000 plus licensees and numerous consumers our voices represent. I refuse to make decisions by the seat of my pants or based on emotion or my individual beliefs. My voice represents too many. Being a commissioner is a job to me. It isn't just a title. I don't care about the titles. I care about my profession. I want to help my profession remain valuable. In preparation for this meeting, I have reached out to consumers, licensees, state agencies, and others to get their input. I have studied Texas Administrative Code Chapters 533 and 535 and Occupations Code Chapter 1101. Thankfully, through great relationships, I've been able to speak to state agencies, people on the Sunset Commission, authors of Senate Bill 524, the Attorney General's Office, and others.
I believe my findings will be helpful for today's discussion. The enforcement memo received in our materials state Section 1101.2051B states the investigation material prepared or compiled by the Commission in connection with a complaint, investigation, or audit may be disclosed to the respondent. The Attorney General has determined that, to me, the respondent is entitled to receive such information. There is no discretion to withhold investigative information and no authority to redact beyond what is in statute. That's what was in our memo. In speaking with the AG's office, they are not able to find a ruling that states the respondent is entitled to receive such information. There are 20 AG rulings regarding information that is subject to disclosure under the Public Information Act, but they were written prior to the addition of 1101.2051D-1. Without going into a deep dive, he referred back to the clause, shall protect to the extent possible. He does not believe identifying information or all documentation must be released. It was mentioned that TREC has not requested a ruling regarding complainant information being released. I was told staff could request a previous determination to withhold information without requesting a ruling on identity of a complainant being released based on 1101.2051D-1. I also communicated with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, the Texas Funeral Service Commission, and Texas State Board of Public Accountancy. The Sunset Commission gave these agencies the same direction they gave TREC. Direct the agency to maintain complainant's confidentiality when possible. When I reached out to the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, I was told, our policy is to protect complainant information as much as possible. We also received direction from Sunset to do this. As a general rule, we share with the respondent only the details necessary for the respondent to understand which transaction or incident we are investigating. Maybe an invoice number we can share, for an example. We may provide a copy of a complaint in some situations with all personal identifiers redacted. In other programs we regulate health professions, we are prohibited by law from sharing any complaint information. He went on to say, it's rarely, if ever, necessary to provide a complainant's full complaint and supporting documents during an investigation. Typically, the respondent would have their own documents related to the transaction or service, so the investigator should only need to identify the transaction or service date for the respondent to be able to respond to our investigator's questions. If the case goes to court, some identifying information may be released. Witnesses that testify will certainly be identified, but SOA hearings can be confidential as well, and information can be introduced under seal to maintain confidentiality when necessary. Most of our hearings are public hearings though, and at that point the respondent would be entitled to discovery, so they would have copies of all exhibits to be entered into evidence. Even then, personal identifiers, email, date of birth, social security numbers, address, telephone number, etc. are redacted from documents. In 2019, Texas Funeral Service Commission implemented section 651.2035. Except as provided, subsection B, a complaint and investigation and all information and materials compiled by the commission in connection with the complaint and investigation are not subject to disclosure under Chapter 552 Public Information Government Code or discovery, disclosure, subpoena, or other means of legal compulsion for release of information to any person. A complaint or investigation subject to subsection A and all information and materials compiled by the commission in connection with the complaint may be disclosed to the commission and commission's employees or agents involved in the license holder discipline, a party to a disciplinary action against the license holder, or that party's designated representative, a law enforcement agency, or a governmental agency if the disclosure is required or permitted by law. The commission is not required under subsection B to release the identity of a complainant who will not testify at a hearing, notwithstanding subsection A, the dismissal or final resolution of a complaint or investigation. A final order of the commission is subject to disclosure under Chapter 522 Public Information Government Code. The Texas State Board of Public Accountancy preferred not to be quoted. Essentially, all complaint information is kept in a file and is made available for inspection by the license holder or former license holder. They do advise complainants if they wish to remain anonymous, they should not provide information that identifies them. In conclusion, I want to reiterate that I'm not here to muddy the waters or suck the life out of staff or others. I'm here to fulfill my oath and to do whatever I can to protect the consumers and all parties involved in the real estate process. I want my profession to thrive and be valuable for many years to come. I hope all of you can open your minds to the information that is being provided to you. All of us hear, see, or interpret things differently, but if we don't ask questions and get on the same page, we aren't benefiting anyone. Our 9 voices represent thousands. We owe it to consumers and licensees to seek information, do our homework, and continue finding ways to better TREC systems and increase the value of the real estate industry. I'm not going to be complacent, make decisions by the seat of my pants, or accept what is told to me without researching. I hope you won't either. So that's a lot of information. And
Okay. I guess where we're at is when you brought it up to staff, they immediately looked at it and made some changes. And I think staff's been very responsive on several things. I'm not for sure where we move now. I mean, the one, there were several agencies. The one that said they redacted the information, do they redact the information from a complainant? Because if there is a complaint, and this is what I'm picturing, if there's a complaint, if Abby files a complaint on me and there's an email and they redact her information, it's one thing, but if that was also copied to Chelsea and Delora, then you follow me, I need that information as a respondent. And I mean, I want us to challenge staff, but at the same time, when they recognize that, okay, this is where we're at, how do we move forward? There hasn't been an AG opinion, and I don't necessarily want an AG opinion unless you can get one without the sacrifice. You follow me?
I would like to speak to that, to be honest with you, because I think, this is what I'll say. It depends on the questions you ask, and if you, it would have been really helpful to me to, I can speak to it right now, but for you to bring that to me in response in advance of like sitting in this room, but I can speak to that. So you're right, there have been, I guess, 26, but I actually have no idea how many opinions there have been. But what I did is I looked at those opinions not as it relates to D1, but as it relates to the right of the respondent as one of those people who is allowed to have access to the investigative material when it's open. So we have a statute that says when it's open, it's confidential, except the commission may disclose to certain individuals, right? And the respondent is one of those individuals. And this is something that we used to talk about at the AG's office a lot. Is that may a shall, right? Because sometimes it is. Sometimes the may is a shall, and that's a determination that they make over there routinely. So what I did, having been over there, I went and I took a look. I say, okay, have they ever addressed the respondent? And the language that they use is that that the requester was not someone who was entitled to release under subsection B. The D1 section talks about redaction of the complainant information to the extent possible by doing it in that complaint notice. That's a completely different section. And so I think, I know you can call and you can get answers, but that's my interpretation. If you think it's wrong, I'm happy to call over there and go through it with them. But when I look at it, that D1 says your authority to redact is here. You can do it to the extent possible by redacting here. But if you look up under B, when it talks about who the commission can disclose to, it has the respondent in there. And those rulings were specifically looking at that entitled to receive under subsection B. And I think it's B, it could be C. And so that's a little bit different. It's a nuanced law. That D1 got put in there. I'm not sure that that's where I would have put that that provision, but kind of got stuck in there under sunset. Yeah. Just
hear my thoughts on, so she happens to be part of the transaction that she was affected, right? But as commissioners, if we observe something, let's say I don't practice in real estate transactions, but I see something, right? And like the example I mentioned before, I saw something on the Texas Tribune, and I've seen this in the other profession as well, where I'm acting on behalf of the commission, not as the individual person of an affected transaction, right? And so if I were to see something and I point our enforcement people towards an actionable offense, then my name would come out as the complainant?
If you, I can let Mike speak to this, if you file a signed written complaint, then you're the official complainant. If you refer something to, let's say you notify Chelsea and me and we loop Mike in and it's like, hey, there's this, we've heard a report that this is going on. I think typically what happens is Mike will look into it and depending on what it is, he kind of tells us, hey, it'd be really helpful to have a complaint here. Can you sign a complaint? Or, this is one where their consumer protection notice is not on their website properly. I can call over there and do it.
But in this case, it was somebody that was unlicensed.
An unlicensed activity.
That's an easy one to run with, right?
And so that is one that staff can self-initiate on and often do, and they're gonna look at that gravity of the complaint and what evidence they might have. But that's a little bit of an outlier. That's not our typical complaint. That's not how we handle our complaints typically. Typically we have that, it's in statute, a signed written complaint.
So there is an avenue to have, as board members or commission members, to have anonymity. And I'm telling you, because it's a very delicate situation, and I found myself in a very similar situation where there's a recording county commission meeting where the CPA goes and delivers an audit opinion on financial statements, and yet the financial statements weren't attached to the opinion. And they clearly said in the meeting, here's the audit opinion, it's a clean opinion, but I'll get you the financial statements later. Obviously, that's a violation of audit standards that I am aware of. So I sent an email with a YouTube link to the general counsel of the public accounting. And I said, hey, you might want to take a look at this video because of these are the issues, right? And I sent it and I fired it away, and then I realized, oh shoot, I forgot about the complainant being revealed, and I certainly didn't want my name. It's like, none of us are comfortable. It's getting back to what you said about, if people are doing things against a profession, you certainly want to protect the profession. But at the same time, I think they have enough information to have an actionable enforcement action without the need of, me as participating as a complainant. And so it gets in a very precarious situation where I'm not acting on behalf of myself, I'm acting on behalf of the board or the commission that I sit on. And I think, to her defense, I think that the licensing issue that, hey, it's an unlicensed, that's an easy one, go after it, right? And so if there's an avenue for anonymity, I think as commissioners and board members, I think it's preferable.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
I think there has to be room for a little bit of that. But if you play that out at one end of the spectrum, what you end up then having is what I have named kind of some sort of VIP back channel, where if you are a particular type of person, you have another option available to you. And I think that can be problematic for you and us. For us, I think consistency keeps us clean. For you, if this becomes widely known, then you all of a sudden are the receiver of a lot of information that then gets, filed, that flows to us from you. And I think that gets us in trouble. But I also understand what you're saying, which is, as a commissioner, you want to be in the business of being able to raise this bar, but you also don't want to be a complainant in 100 complaints. I mean, that's.
Oh, you're the police.
Then you're the police. Yeah, so then how do you do that? I don't have a real clear answer to that.
No. So in the information I provided you, there were several different avenues, and Scott's question was, where do we go from here? And my thought would be, have staff do just like the AG said, have staff request a previous determination to withhold info without requesting a ruling. look at TDLR's interpretation, because they were given the same rules that we were, and then call Sunset and ask for their interpretation.
Sunset doesn't have any authority over us at this point,
Right.
so what they say, like, I don't trust their
But you can go
interpretation.
back to the people at Sunset that were on this committee and ask them, what was the spirit of this? What did you mean?
I think what we're faced with now is the letter of the law. So-
Right.
And so
And you
we
could call, and
have
you
a
could
job
call,
to
right,
interpret.
and you can call the author of that law. I have, so. you can
I
do
don't
that.
care what the, I mean, I don't mean to be argumentative, but what the words say is
Correct.
all that matters now. What he or she wanted it to say is not relevant anymore.
Right, but have you asked what those words mean, other than what staff interprets them to be?
I mean, that's
That's
a little bit of my job.
Because I know, because TDLR and all these others are interpreting the same exact language differently.
And they're doing that as staff who are lawyers doing their jobs too. And the fact that there are the fact that there are differences in interpretation is not unusual. And I mean, I don't trust TDLR lawyers more so than I trust who I hired to be the lawyer. Now, is there room to go back and see what else we can do I mean, here's my fear. I do not want to be a type of administrator who hears a criticism by any commissioner and says, oh no, I can't do that. That's not how we do things. And that's my fear, is that that's who you'll think we are, or that's how this conversation will be received. My goal is to get to a yes whenever possible. Sometimes I think the yes is, I want to say that in the majority of times, but there will have to be a no sometimes. I'm not here to say that today, but we can look into what information can be withheld that protects a complainant. But we also have a requirement to assume that a respondent is innocent and to provide them with all of the information that is available to defend themselves. And that can't be a lesser interest than the complainant's identity.
Correct.
And I think it's one thing if somebody is an actual party to the violation, that's a little bit different. But there's certain things that, kind of like you were saying, if something is brought to the attention of staff that is an obvious violation, especially unlicensed activity, we have an obligation, I think, to look into that, because that could certainly, because otherwise we just say, well, we don't have a complainant, then I guess we're saying that somebody can be defrauding people or whatever, just until somebody finally complains, and we can't do that. I mean, we have an obligation to act. Now, obviously, advertising issues and things like that may be, there's probably less potential for harm to the consumer for that, but, I've sent Mike a long list of websites that were in violation, but yet I guess I would have had to file a specific complaint to have that looked into, and that's not, I'm not doing that as in my personal capacity. If I see something while I'm looking at real estate industry stuff, so, oh, that's wrong, they can't do that. That needs to be acted on in some kind of a way, because we have an obligation to do it. And I'm not the complainant as myself. I'm acting on behalf of,
Right.
I was
Yeah,
appointed to do a
throwing
job,
stuff at us,
and
pointing
I
things
need,
out.
I
On
need
behalf
to,
of the commission. Yeah, I think her situation is she's got her foot in, in her personal, professional, life, as well as the commission. So when there's that division,
It's tenuous.
you can interpret it both ways. I mean, I'll tell you what, she'll probably be averse to doing any more complaints for sure because of this. I would be.
That's how most people are scared of
Yeah.
retaliation. It's our
Yeah.
business, it's our livelihood.
So an unlicensed, person from 2012 is gonna keep doing unlicensed activity because nobody would be willing to, come out and sign their name complaint, and it's a very difficult situation, I certainly appreciate it.
Commissioner Miller?
I'm almost ready. Would like to hear what Mike says before I talk.
I was just gonna say, I mean, everything that gets sent to this building is subject to open records, with the exceptions under public. So an email that we would get from a commissioner said, please look into this. We could initiate, staff initiate a complaint. And we do, on occasion, to do that, you know. When a person comes to us and say, where'd you find this? Where'd you get this? We have an obligation to disclose where we got it from. I want to be honest with the things, because if they want to challenge it and they want to take it to SOA, the SOA judge is going to ask, what's your foundation based upon this? Where did this come from? And we're going to have to legally set out basically a foundation in order to prove up this violation, in order to establish our jurisdiction, in order to go through this stuff. So that's where I encourage people to file complaints. I understand it's difficult. It's, you know, you get, you know, I'm very sorry what happened to, you know, Commissioner Lerner. That was not my intended, you know.
But on my example, real quick, sorry, Jim. On my example, if that had come to you on an anonymous email, the answer to the question, where'd you see this, is on your website, because it's right there.
It's public.
Correct.
They couldn't, I would have provided the email though.
Okay, fine,
Yeah.
but if it's anonymous, the violation is still self-evident.
Right.
On
But
those
you would only have
situations.
to provide it if it was requested.
Yeah, a lot of stuff I would imagine would settle long before they ever got to us, so, you know what I'm saying, and you say, okay,
But on the front end, there's
Correct.
no use going after a case that you don't have evidence to prove.
right,
Or that you don't have-
right, unless you've got an unlicensed person making a video talking about their home cell service that they'll do for $500. You know what I'm saying?
But even if you had the evidence, like TDLR says, typically the respondent would have their own documents related to the transaction or service, so the investigator should only need to identify the transaction or service date for the respondent to be able to respond to our investigator's questions. So there's not a reason to give it on the front end.
But, okay, let me add this, okay? Number one, we can, anonymous complaints at the association were for the slam dunk, the low hanging fruit, advertising or whatever. I think with what we've done so far, redacting the name on the initial complaint letter is good, okay? If we go as far as TDLR and says, look, if I do a transaction with Jan and she files a complaint on me, they're saying, well, you have all the documentation. I don't know who else she emailed in that chain. Did she talk to the appraiser? Did she talk to the inspector? Did she talk to the repairman? Did she talk to other brokers? If I'm a respondent, I want everything. I want everything they have. So they can't assume that I have all the documentation to defend myself, because there's other stuff in the transaction. Now, we need to keep it, I mean, I think you brought up a good thing. You know, this could have been redacted in the initial, and we need to do that. But if I'm a licensee, I want all the information. If they emailed, you know, Mark Woodruff on something, I want to know what that email said. So I don't think we can do a TDLR set, but I haven't dug deep into it.
Right,
But as far as us doing a complaint, if I could do a complaint anonymously because I'm a commissioner, and everybody starts emailing me stuff, well, look at this, look at this, look at this. I acted on hers, didn't act on his, then it just opens a huge can of worms. I mean, I think we need to keep it, like Sunset said, confidential to a certain point where we can, but just like Michael said, if I get anything, I'm coming in and asking. And we have to be prepared for that. I'm glad you brought it up, because we do need to keep it anonymous as much as possible and confidential. But I also agree with Chelsea. I would rather go to battle with the way Vanessa interprets it versus TDLR, because she knows our industry. She knows, she's seen us in front of the SOA and everything else. So I mean, we need to protect it as much as possible, but ultimately we can't totally protect it.
So let's use the case that I sent you as an example. Why does every bit of that complaint that I sent in have to go to the respondent day one? All you have to do is pick up the phone and say, are you using this license number? And obviously you probably say yes, and then go from there.
And I think staff has recognized we could have handled and maybe should have handled this differently than, because I promise you, if the same complaint came in today, it should be and would be handled differently. Yeah, and that's why I'm glad you brought this up, because we learn, you know, I mean, we progress by learning. And so I promise, I'll put it like this, if you brought the same thing in, it was handled the same way, then staff did not learn and did not do what they say they would do, then we'd have an issue. But
Are you
this
telling me
is
they're
moving
not
forward.
going to send all of that complaint
We will.
Okay.
information?
If
It's a rule that
You-
requires it.
you send the letter, the initial letter said, here's your complaint, and the CC says complaint, does not say Commissioner Lerner, Commissioner Kestner. If that comes to me and I walk in and say, I wanna see it,
Right.
they're gonna have to provide it.
Correct,
But
but does
right
it have to
now,
go out
it's finished.
initially?
No, and that's what they've
But we
corrected.
do, well, no, what we corrected is that instead of CC Leslie Lerner, we now CC complainant, and then we attach all that we receive.
Right,
And part of that, you said there's a rule that requires it.
There's a rule that requires that when the complaint's open, all information provided in the initial complaint and the attachments are to be provided to the respondent.
Where's that rule?
We'll find it.
I will find it.
There's also a process. There's a simplification of process. How many cases did we get last year? 6,000?
while they're looking at, on your complaint, if I send it in and I send a complaint and I have a copy of page 10 of the contract with the license number, or just a shot of an advertising, then your name might be on the other side of the contract, might not be, that would have to go. But I'm saying they're gonna redact your name as for this complaint.
Right, which I have a copy of that, but when I sent this complaint in, I sent the copy of that contract, I sent all of her MLS listings that they've been using that, and whatever, it was all sent to the respondent, every bit of it.
And real quick, and just to make a clarification, I think everybody understands this, but, you know, the comments that I made and the examples that I gave are not because, you know, we all receive all sorts of emails and things like that all the time. You know, almost all of them I forward, you know, to Vanessa or to you or whatever. Or if somebody just mentions something to me, I tell them to contact TREC. So none of this is about, at least for me, not me wanting to be, you know, Mr. Complaint filer, anonymous complaint filer. But it is about the public's ability to do that. And we've been talking for months about, if not years, about, you know, making the industry better by encouraging people to make complaints. And so if we're gonna do that, we need to make sure that they feel comfortable doing that. So I know her example is a little more personal, but I don't get the sense that it's not because it's about you. It's about the industry in general, being able to make it better by not fearing making complaints and fearing retaliation on something that doesn't require all of this notification.
And I just want to speak, I'm sure that there's a way to get some resolution on some of this stuff. I think the conversation we'll have on the low-level offenses, you know, I like I said in my memo, I don't think we're that far off on that, but I do want to remind everyone, so I said this earlier, we are the government, okay? As we're sitting in this room, we are the government. And we have a statutory duty in terms of redacting the complainant, that it says protect the identity of the complainant as much as possible by redacting it from that complaint notice, okay? That is our legal duty to the complainant, right? But we have a much bigger duty to the respondent because we are looking at sanctioning, taking away their license. So there is an enhanced due process requirement. And I want to be really I'm gonna keep saying that because I wanna be mindful when we talk about, you know, not turning over all of the information, right? Delaying it, only giving them just what they need to have an idea of what is going to be alleged against them. And is that what you want in terms of being that governmental entity? Do you, I think we have erred on the side of transparent as possible. We're going to give you, and you see this in criminal cases. Commissioner Miller brought up this example in the meeting, and yes, it's a bit of an extreme one, but it's the same principles, right? You want, as the government, you want to say, here's the evidence against you, and please answer to it, right? And we want to I just want to keep reminding everyone that we've got to do that, and in order for Mike's team to take things all the way, right, to pursue and to get the PFDs that, the ones yesterday you had 3 that you, those are probably a little bit different because they were criminal history ones, but regardless, in order for them to have what they need to pursue those cases and not have them be dismissed, not have us be sued that we're just going after folks, that we're picking and choosing. I think staying above board and remembering that our duty is to provide due process to the respondents in these cases. I'm happy to work and look at things. I'm happy to visit with TDLR. They have a very different system than us. In general, their complaints are not gonna say less complicated, they're different than ours. And I'm happy to visit, and I will do that. I know we don't have to, but I'm always happy to talk to people. I just want to be I want to give you my legal opinion. I want you to ask me questions, and I want you to trust it. And I'm looking at you, Commissioner Lerner, because it feels like you're not trusting my legal opinion. That's okay. You can question it all you want. No. That doesn't hurt my personal feelings. Like, I like you very much, right? But you can say, hey, I don't agree with that position, and that's okay. I'm happy to do the research on that. But everything that I've researched, all my experience, I've been in open records business for a very long time. I know that stuff, and I want to get us to a solution. I think I can get us there in general, but I just have to keep reiterating this position of, we are the government. What do we owe to the person whose license is on the line? Abby and I have been reading law review articles on this. I mean, we've been in it, right? Trying to really get to where it is.
Do y'all remember, this is a little bit extreme, but when you said this, it popped into my mind. Do y'all remember the Michael Morton case? There's a law that's the Michael Morton Act that was passed several years ago now. And it was Michael Morton's wife was murdered. And he was convicted of that crime. And that happened because the prosecution had information, DNA evidence, that they never passed over to the defense. Yes. And so now the Michael Morton Act is the act that requires the prosecution to hand over all evidence that they have to the defense. Michael Morton testified after that DNA came out, DNA evidence came out that exonerated him. He was in prison for something like 20 years, lost his whole son's childhood. That is the criminal case, but the principle is the same. You hand over what you have in order to defend yourself.
Well, let me go back to Commissioner Lerner's complaint. Okay, and I'm just, now we can redact the complainant, which is good. If I have low-hanging fruit, and I'm gonna call that low-hanging fruit, when they sign a contract with an expired license, it's pretty, okay. I could have sent that in with my information blocked out on the other side of the contract. Could I have sent an MLS listing in with, I don't know how mine says printed by Scott at Century 21, whatever. Could I block that out? Otherwise, on the low-hanging stuff, it should be easy to redact the complainant's name if they don't have to send a whole lot in. It's when it gets probably deeper that it's gonna be harder to, because the low-hanging fruit, they're probably doing agreed order, correct? They're just gonna.
Guilty.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll send everything in.
And sometimes less is more for confidentiality, I guess is what I'm saying.
Under our rules,
But
it
if it's
says,
sent,
under 535, 142F, it says, the commission staff commission staff determines complaints within our jurisdiction. A copy of the complaint, including attachments, will be sent to the respondent.
But we've got to, I'm just gonna throw this out there too. We can only redact what we have authority to redact, right? That's if you look at the Public Information Act, what it says is everything we have is open to the public except these items, right? That's what the act is. The act is the things that are not. So social security numbers, credit card numbers, et cetera. But the foundation of that is everything is open. So unless you have specific authority to redact something, you cannot. And that is why when I look at that statute and it says they can protect the complainant identifying information by redacting from the initial complaint notice, that's super limited. That is how I would read that statute. I spent however many years over the AG doing this. I mean, we have to remember, we can't just, here you go, here's a bunch of stuff that's redacted, because again, do you want the government turning over a bunch of stuff that they've redacted and they can't show you the law that says that they could redact that information? No, because you're immediately like, well, what are they hiding? What are they doing? I mean, that's the whole purpose of that. So I just want to remind everyone, like, we can only scratch out what we're allowed to scratch out by law.
But your intention from here forward
Mhm.
is to keep the complainant anonymous
Until necessary.
until necessary.
Well,
And I don't like the word "till necessary."
And I don't like anonymous, cause.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No anonymous complaint.
I'm sorry.
We will withhold the identifying information of the complainant in the notice,
Okay.
which is really limited. That is not confidential, it is not anonymous, it means in that first
Okay.
letter that we redact the complainant's name,
The initial.
right?
And that's exactly right. That's what it says.
Which is a little
It
silly.
doesn't say initial.
It is,
It says the complaint, I mean, I don't have the exact quote. What is it? It's the complaint notice file or form.
so the next time
Did you
anybody
know that that
complains,
letter just
send
started
it in an
after
anonymous
the
letter
search?
by snail.
Well, I was gonna say that the challenge is
Complaint
that,
notice.
here, we're now seeing why, the challenge involved
Yes.
in getting more complaints, right? I mean, because after hearing
But, yeah.
hearing it all vetted out,
Yeah.
I mean, I
But respondents have rights as well.
totally understand, and I'm just saying, now it's,
You see why the problem is.
I see the problem.
Yeah.
The dilemma.
The dilemma, right, because, I do think Scott made a good point about, well, I mean, what, if you have something that how much do you have to send in, and, that sort of thing, and I guess, it's one thing if we're sending it in, it's another thing, I guess, I say, it's the same thing, but I mean, if you've got John Public or another practitioner or something, they're going to make their own decisions on that.
See, and I think where I see it is, if the complaint has enough predication minus the complainant.
Right.
And the commission is able to take the ball and run with it without, like something I saw on a YouTube video or the
Yeah.
Texas Tribune, and they can run with it, why not go that avenue?
That's an obvious challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that,
Yeah.
and I guess that is the dilemma, right? I mean, because I agree with that, and that's kind of, what Jason was saying too, I mean.
And we may be able to kind of play that out, like get together with staff and see what that would look like. I've asked this question of Rello at the last couple of meetings, or a few meetings ago, I should say, of who takes anonymous complaints, because I was just curious. And in a very informal poll in the room, it looked like about half of the jurisdictions, but what they all said is that many of them get dismissed because there's not enough evidence, there's no one to circle back to, there's no witness, right? So I think it just creates this other issue, but if things are standalone, then I think part of that is the low hanging fruit thing, like if it's an advertising thing, and we have a plan to figure that out, we just need a new database to do it. If they're really big problems, like consumer harm issues, then I think we treat those as the one-offs. But for then the majority in the middle, that's when you need things that are transaction based, or you've got to have a witness, which is the reason why the statute says you have to have a signed written complaint.
But it is low hanging fruit.
Yeah, Oh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just had a thought during this conversation. If I see a sign, a for sale sign, that is clearly against advertising rules, because I know the advertising rules, so I'm no agent, they not. And I just sent a picture of that sign to Chelsea. Could there be a letter from TREC that just says, we received this, you don't know who it's from, or you do know, because I sent it. But could you send a letter saying, you need to look at the advertising, here's the advertising rule, you are not abiding by it,
yes,
fix it.
so that's where we need our enhanced database to just be able to basically triage those. And we have a plan in place for doing that. When we started looking at doing that this year, it was a conversation about like, could we have an ombudsman that just fixed these little things? It became more complicated than using the current system that we have until we have a new database. But yes, I think there's room absolutely for that sort of thing.
But as you saw in a lot of these responses, depending on how far it goes. No, you saw it here with the exception of, I think, Colorado, basically everyone had the caveat of, yeah, but, if we're gonna go to hearing, if we're gonna do this, if someone requests it after it's closed, it all ended up being pretty similar, like there wasn't, and so that's because those due process concerns I talk about, they're not just Texas, that's everywhere.
But some cases, like Leslie's, that the guy wasn't licensed, that's a pretty clear-cut thing, guy.
But we would still have in our file, right, that somebody sent us an email saying, hey, check out this. I assume, Mike, you keep everything that you have in that file, right?
You have to.
We're required to.
Right, and so, but you're right, it doesn't necessarily, I just think it's always we can do our very best on those low-level ones. And I think that triage system we talked about, I thought the citation authority idea was cool too. And that'd be a legislative change, but I thought that was neat, Mike thought it was neat too. But it's still, and you saw it in those answers, it's like, yes, but
All the
it's
things.
this.
Yeah.
I'm just to circle back to Chelsea's comments on, I did some research. So when people submit a complaint, signed written complaint, they have to have reasonable cause, to establish jurisdiction or initiate an investigation. A lot of times people will throw in a bunch of allegations and not provide any documents at all. So we have to go back to the complaint and ask, that. I did a straw poll with our legal assistants, and about 15 to 20% of complaints, we have to reach out to complainants in order to get information in order to establish reasonable cause to open it. Those 3 complaints against Ms. Rutherford, 2 of those people we had to reach out to get information. So with the fraudster, with everything like that. That's stuff I'm really worried about, that people, the complaint form includes a checklist, and people sometimes will check stuff and not even attach it, things like that. And an online system, I really, you don't have to fill out the form and sign it and stuff, and be electronically signed. I think that will encourage people because it's gonna be a simpler process if you upload things. I'm excited to see if that will actually, encourage people to file complaints because it's easier to do it. But those are the things I'm concerned about, because we would have to dismiss a lot of cases for failure to go forward because we didn't have enough information there. If we don't have the person's name, then we don't have the ability to reach out to them to get that information.
And our statute requires a signed written complaint.
Yes.
Yeah, but I thought that
As
was,
it should.
there was, Oklahoma was very much like, of course we self-initiate and we'll put the staff in the shoes, and then you heard from and that was from their ED who, wrote his answer, and then you got the answer from the enforcement person who's like, yeah, but then we gotta dismiss any of those where we can't get a witness and we don't have the evidence, so a lot of those just end up going south. And so it seems a little bit like oh gosh, what's that effort? What's the benefit to taking on cases where your evidence isn't good and you don't have a witness and you don't, that doesn't seem to be speeding things up or getting the results you want. I found this stuff.
Hold us at a high standard, especially if you're a pro se person defending yourself. they're gonna expect our attorneys are above board with our evidence, proving it up. And, you know, we don't always win them all, but, you know, we want a positive outcome for all the cases that we take to SOA. So that's what we think through when we're offering an agreed order to an individual, is they don't have to take it. Even if we have like black and white proof, they could take it to a hearing, lose out, but, you know, that's still something we have to keep in the back of our mind.
And we had a case yesterday that went to SOA for less than $5,000 in fines, right? I mean, people spent way more money, and that's fine, that's their right. But they spent way more money on attorneys than on to pay the fines. And they had their reasons, and I don't know what they are, but they had their reasons, and that's their right. And they got to see the evidence against them, and
I don't want to squash Leslie's urge to ask questions at all. I mean, that's how we've all stayed in business, is trying to make things better. So please don't take it
No,
that
I
way.
totally agree, because she took us from A to B to C.
I think
And if she wouldn't have asked, we might not get to C and D, but she took us from where we were at to where we're at now,
Right,
which is
and that's-
huge.
And that's important. I think this is an important kind of journey, right? Because we've all agreed it's a dilemma, you know, that, you know, as to, well, we've seen in practice, there's lots of issues, and some of this, I like the term lower hanging fruit, license issues, advertising, et cetera. Being able to deal with that efficiently is
quick and easy.
quick and easy ought to be a priority. Now, I understand easy and quick may fly in the face of what our statutes are, so I don't know. But going down that path to try to see if we can do more, I think's the right thing, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
And I don't know where it takes us, but I mean, I think the intent of that's good, because we're experiencing right now back to the dilemma of why, you know, we can't get more.
Well, don't you think the lesson that is here is what can we learn from this?
Yes,
Because we learned something from this. We learned Sunset had changed the rule, right?
right. I appreciate it being brought to the table.
And so our staff did their due diligence. And Leslie, thank God for you, because you asked questions above and beyond what Frank Glenn had the nerve to do.
And
No, I think it's,
And ultimately, it's gonna get to the point to where if I'm a practitioner and I'll file a complaint, I'm gonna have to recognize the fact my name might be out there.
yeah.
And I was telling Chelsea, I had two situations last 10 days. One of them with a huge national company, thousands and thousands of agents, called, left a general email, general voicemail on a Wednesday, nothing back, called on Monday, got a call back, was taken care of. Next one was a broker with 9 LLCs, 9 different companies, 80-something agents, and advertising. Sent an email, made a phone call, got a phone call back from him the next day, and an email from the agent apologizing for the advertising.
Right.
And I had told myself, if I did not get it, I will send it in. And again, I mean, did I want to do that? No, but it was to the point to where, yeah.
Right, I agree with you.
And I love when it works out like that, but then if it's, yeah.
Well, and I do think that's, in our company, we talk about this fact that, look, you know, if we wanted to improve, then we're gonna have to step up and be part of the solution and take some of the, you know, and yeah, you can't, you know, I mean, so I think that's where it's gotta go, and I think responsible practitioners, you know, do that. I think that it's, but it's hard, but I have some agents that, you know, frankly are like, well, you know, it's not that important.
But I learned something today that sometimes less is more.
That's right.
Can I ask a question? Okay, just going forward. In thinking about how could we have maybe handled this differently? Would it have been better for a commissioner to bring it to you all first? And maybe even in here to bring it before we go forward?
I think we need to have a better answer to that question. I think that we as staff have really struggled, and I'm just being perfectly honest with, I think my kind of drumbeat of we do not want a back channel, we want to treat everyone fairly. I think there has been that pendulum, and I think we need to, as staff, figure out what the best case scenario is for the 9 of you. I don't want you to feel like there's this back channel. I also don't want you to feel like you have to file a complaint all the time. It has to be somewhere in the middle. So I think we as staff need to kind of get our ducks in a row to be able to answer that question.
So then that's-
So I think there's gotta be a way.
I think there's, and I want to look into it too, because there's also some complications, some case law that talks about, can there actually be a fair hearing when a member of the governing body files the complaint?
Oh, that's a good one.
And so I want to say, we do have this drumbeat to file a complaint, and I think, I love that people take it very seriously, and I think on this commission they take it seriously, but, I think we want to promote that. I need to look into that case because that's an interesting one, right? Maybe it's not, as much as we talk about it, maybe the role of the commissioner though isn't to be out there. I think Chelsea, there's that line of like, well, we're not, you aren't the police.
That's
And
right.
that's true. You don't have an enhanced, you don't have a duty to say, that's wrong, that's wrong,
I think that puts you in a precarious position.
It
Yeah, I don't
does,
think it's
but I think
fair,
we need to
but-
examine that because there's also the times where, like, I think in this instance, like you were impacted by it, right? It was a transaction you were doing, that kind of a thing. So I think you're right. I think we need to look at that. I think probably we are so not bent, it's not the right word, committed, to file a complaint mantra here, and I think that's really important. That's in the new Broker responsibility. It's, get it in there, get that done. So maybe, we take a step from that and look, okay, what do we do in this scenario? We can analyze that. And I'd like to look into that case law a little bit more that was in there. And so I want to do that
That's a
deep.
good coordination with TDLR. How do you handle it with your government?
I think it makes it easy, and maybe it's the hats that I wear. When I say file a complaint to other people, I'm saying, y'all file a complaint. TREC needs it because the only way that TREC can act is if a complaint is filed. And so, and then it's that, I've been so frustrated since I've been here that TREC can only be reactive. I want to be proactive in our business, and that's what we do as brokers. We've got to be proactive in training our agents and all that. But you all have that responsibility of only being reactive. And I think that's right.
For education, proactive.
Right, but in the hat then that we wear as commissioners, we can only wear the commissioner hat as being reactive. And preaching in the education, y'all complain, general public, y'all complain.
So
Commissioner Lerner.
I have a question. So in our rules, it states if a commission staff determines that a complaint is within the commission's jurisdiction, a copy of the complaint, including attachments, will be sent to the respondent. And then it says the commission will protect the identity of a complainant to the extent possible by excluding complainant's identifying information from complaint notice sent to the respondent. Was this written prior to sunset
No,
or afterwards?
this rule was enacted right at the time of the sunset.
Because isn't that a different wording than is in the occupation code that was added by sunset?
It should be a mirroring.
What are you reading as different?
I want to go back and look.
Here, I'll read the statute and then we can compare with the rule, but the statute says the commission shall protect the identity of a complainant to the extent possible by excluding the complainant's identifying information from a complaint notice sent to a respondent.
complaint notice.
That's the statute.
So to the extent possible by doing this.
After sunset, the sunset bill passed, and then we went through a process of implementing the parts of the bill that required rule change. And so that rule was added as part of the sunset implementation.
So that's our rule, it's not legislative.
Within,
With both of them.
there's both.
You've got a rule that basically mirrors statute, which is legislative.
Sometimes not exact. The
Yeah.
wording is not
Right.
exact. And we've tried, I mean, you pointed that out before. I think we tried to go through and work on it during quadrennial.
Will you read that one more time? I'm looking for it on my piece of paper. I don't see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 1101.2051D1.
Right.
The commission shall protect the identity of a complainant to the extent possible by excluding the complainant's identifying information from a complaint notice sent to a respondent.
So how is complaint notice?
What's the definition of that? That's our,
The initial stuff that's sent in,
Is that-
the actual complaint
I have a copy of it if you.
Right, so
complaint has been filed against
Right.
you.
So if that's redacted, but it does, where does it say you have to send all documentation initially?
The rule right above there says all attachments. F. Commission shall determine a complaint within its jurisdiction. A copy of the complaint, including attachments, will be sent to the respondent.
And where's that in the occupations code?
It's not, but I think the thought is that what we do is we send that letter and we send the evidence against them. I mean, could it be a separate letter? That'd be a whole other communication. If you're doing that to delay the reveal of the complainant identity, you're also hindering the respondent's sort of turnaround time and ability to defend their case, which again, I'm just gonna keep stressing is what we really have got to focus on. That's where our
But
duty
if we
is.
took that little section out, if you have these advertising complaints and other stuff, people could turn them in and all of that not go to them.
But why?
To
Why
do
not
just
turn
exactly
over
what
the-
came out of sunset is to not identify the complainant.
Well, what came out of sunset is that statute that says we've got to, I know you disagree and I'm happy to visit with other agencies on it. But I don't see it as extending anything past that complaint notice.
If it's low hanging fruit and it's advertising, it still needs to be sent. Because if I just get a letter from TREC
I
saying,
get that.
saying you have violated the Advertising Act, boom, 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 where?
Right, I get that,
Where?
but if I send in a file like I did, and it had
Let's go.
page 10, it had all of these listings she had with the same, was it really necessary to send all of that?
But according to the rule, yes.
Right,
But-
but that's our rule,
Yeah.
which is not statute.
You're right, you could change that rule, and in that instance, you're taking the position that you don't think we need to turn over all that information. That investigative file is, they're still entitled to it.
And
If requested.
If requested, but also they've gotta be able to, I mean, if someone files a complaint against you and you're not given all the information, how does that,
how do you defend yourself?
How do you
No,
defend
right,
yourself?
but if I was sent what I sent them before, I mean, you could show them one MLS listing and it shows you're using this number and you're using this name, that's a slam dunk right there. There was no reason for my name to be on it, and 50 pages of stuff sent.
Right, and
But
we,
it's what you were thorough in sending to
Right.
them that made them have to send it.
Because that's what I thought I had to do, but that doesn't make them have to send it, that's what they choose to send.
Well, it's what our rule says that we need to
Right.
do.
And I've got one right here that was sent right after sunset, and everything on it is redacted. It was an advertising complaint. And it didn't even have the cover letter. The cover letter has been added since. But all that's been redacted and the complaint, all it is said in the complaint form is agent is advertising on social media that they are a licensed broker. And they gave the Facebook thing. That's all.
that's it.
I've never known to this day who sent this complaint that we had to defend. And
But why was that important? If y'all were doing it, you were doing it. Why is it important to know who sent it?
A lot of people, I can say when when we started the policy that you called us on, the phones blew up. People wanted to know who filed this complaint, who filed this complaint.
I'm sure I called and said that.
It really spiked our phone calls.
Well, you also,
So-
They
The
wouldn't tell you.
complaint I did, spiked your phone calls?
No,
No, the
when we changed
change.
the policy where we started redacting all the identifying information on the initial complaint notice. It's spiked that, so there's people, they wanna know who filed it, so, I mean, this is their right to know.
If it has to do with a transaction, you're gonna know.
Yeah, you gotta.
But why
know,
wouldn't they
but-
have to file an open records request if that's the case?
They're not gonna do that, so the complaint
Exactly.
system
Because they
doesn't
only
do
have
it
so many
anyway.
days to respond,
It's 14 days to
and I'm not gonna,
But does it matter during those 14 days if you know who filed it? What does that complainant's name matter?
well, we just don't have the authority to redact it though. And that's the thing. I cannot take I'm gonna say Sharpie, that's not what I would use. A Sharpie to a document unless I can point to you, that's 552.136, it says that I can redact credit card
Well,
information.
that's why I think we still need to go back to the Attorney General's office and ask for that ruling.
But ask for what ruling? Because a
Just like
previous,
he said to request a previous determination to withhold info without requesting a ruling.
that is a thing in open records. I don't,
It requires authority.
it requires the authority to do it, and I don't think we have it. If we get, if somebody wants to file a request and we wanna take it to them, we can see.
I mean, I don't care if you take my stuff.
Well, they
Take it
won't
to
give
them
you a
and say,
previous determination. Here's how those work. Previous terminations don't happen unless you have a number of requests to that effect, and then you can eventually petition to get one. They're actually pretty hard to get. So it's not just kind of just ask for a previous determination. We have actually asked for one on something else and we didn't get it. Even though they give it to us every single time we request the ruling. So those are actually pretty hard to get. But
What that means, let me just
Yeah.
interpret per se. So, in order to withhold something as confidential through a public information request, you have to send it to the AG's office for a ruling that says, do you agree that this is confidential, yes or no? And so if we sent the same type of information to them time and time again, over time, then we would say, hey, instead of going through this whole thing every time, can we get a previous determination that says, every time this type of thing is asked for, you don't have to include it? And that's what's hard to get. So, but in order to withhold it each time, you have to send it to them to say, do you agree?
And so, what those opinions are saying is they say, when you look at them, it says, we've reviewed the information that you have sent us, which is the investigation file. We note the requester is not one of the individuals who is entitled to receive this information under subsection B. And subsection B says, notwithstanding A, which says this stuff is confidential, the information or material prepared by the commission in connection with a complaint, investigation, or audit may be disclosed, number one, to the respondent of the complaint. And the reason for that is everything we've been talking about, it's that due process component.
Right.
So there is a right of access to
Right,
that.
so they have it if they file a complaint or they file an open records request.
Right, so you're right, this is an open record statute, but what they're saying is there is an entitlement, it's not confidential to them. So if I would really struggle with us implementing a process that says, respondent, we know you are entitled to this information, however, you must file an open records request every single time you want to see the evidence against you. I think we would be met with some lawsuits on that, I really do.
But if you say, per the Attorney General's opinion, here we go, turn in mine, I don't care. This is how we have to handle
So
it.
those letter rulings are done, it's specific to each request themselves until you get a previous determination. They don't issue a lot of previous determinations. You've got to essentially prove you can roll your eyes at me, but
I'm not rolling my eyes at all.
well, okay.
Not at all.
It feels tense, but I'm
But-
just trying to
No.
explain to you an area of law that I'm very familiar with.
the Freedom of Information Act, okay, someone files a complaint, my information's redacted. Then I've got 14 days to respond. I wanna know who it was, the other information. I've gotta file a Freedom of Information Act that takes how many days?
It's 10 business days,
10 business days.
unless we need to request a ruling.
Right,
In which case it's
10 business
45.
days. as a respondent, I am hamstrung because I can't get the information. And
But why do you need who turns you in if it's an advertisement?
because
the
if
process.
if it's an advertisement, then, and they send in the complaint with one photo, good, that's one thing.
Right.
But if they send other stuff in, I might wanna ask, and as a
Right.
respondent, it's my right. But ultimately, I mean, we have moved from here to here as far as redacting, but we've gotta keep the due process, and I'm not for sure how we do. I mean, I'm not sure how we keep the due process and keep everything done. And that's what I like about staff. We brought them an issue, you brought them an issue, but we can do this. We can't go any further. We've got to be able to recognize this is as far as we can go. Now, is it something with the new database? We can look at different ways to maybe increase that? Yes. But according to the rules and the statute, this is as far as we can go.
Right,
And
so if we talk about changing that one rule, whether it ever.
how can we change the one rule and protect the respondent's due
Because you still have
process?
the confidentiality, you just don't have to send out everything initially.
But, okay, but if you don't send everything out initially, and I go ahead and I take the agreed order, and later I find other information, then I'm gonna come back and say, wait a minute, you didn't give full disclosure.
Right.
I
but
want
for,
full
like,
disclosure.
Advertising and stuff, if you look at what these other agencies are doing, they pick up the phone and call, or they send a warning letter and it's over with.
And we can possibly get to that point. We are to that point on the minor
Right, but not
transactions.
with effort, G,
but-
whatever one that was, you can't.
But we got an agent, got a letter reprimand, I can't remember what, a letter reprimand, but they were still entitled to see what the complaint was. They just were. And we've got to this point where we're gonna redact what we can, but we can't interfere with due process, and we have to have confidence in the staff to know what they're talking about. We really do.
I think if you could give us 18 months, if we can get a new database implemented, we cannot guarantee confidentiality. But on an advertising complaint, we will have a mechanism to handle these low-level complaints in a very simple way.
What does Ruben, Ben call his,
Conditional dismissal.
conditional dismissal?
So this,
I mean, we're not opposed to that. We just need implementation of a database that we're days away from signing a contract.
But we're not there.
but it's
Why
not
did it take the new database to do that?
So I cannot flag it as a low level thing. I will say, we don't get a lot of advertising complaints. We discover them in the investigative process. The investigators will go out there, they'll look at the people's advertising, the IBSs and some of that. Commissioner Miller is one of the rare few where someone will actually turn in a complaint. I'm sorry, this is an example.
It was right at.
Well, we don't get many that just say this is an advertising violation on a photograph. What we get is people that don't understand the education, that rule, and we get umpteen amount of emails, because I handle the attorney duty just like my other staff, a couple times a month, about people that just do not understand that rule. And for me,
That's great.
there's basically there's two things you need to understand about it, but we get sales agents that come to us, and I'm not turning around the discussion or anything like that. It's just stuff I see on the street, and what you guys see probably every day is there's sales agents that go out there and they email us asking, will you approve my advertisement? Or some of that, and I feel bad in some cases because I'll look up a broker or whatever, I'm like, I'm just gonna answer this person's thing, but I'm gonna CC the broker or whatnot, because I guess I tell them like, your broker's responsible for approving your advertising, but I'm gonna answer the question anyhow.
The reason, but to answer your question exactly, why do we need a new database? It's just volume and the limitations of our current system. If we get more than 500 complaints a month, that's a lot every day. And so just being able to triage these low-level offenses and being able to handle them differently. If we were to do that today, I would need to hire like a handful of people to be able to just do that. And that and for a low-level offense, that seems like kind of a, like not a, I'm hesitant to do that, yeah.
Yeah, but we
But if
hired
we can-
6, trying to get the 6 months down.
Right. So, but if we can get a new database that allows for those efficiencies, then I think we'll be able to be more nimble in this regard.
And we've talked about ombudsman, what dismissal?
Conditional
Conditional
dismissal.
dismissal, I can't remember that
If you
word.
fix this, this will be dismissed,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Uh,
And then all of a sudden, when we started looking into how to implement it, it was like, well, we need 6 people to stand on their head to do this.
Maybe just
Well,
like
put your-
the citation stuff. I thought that was, I mean, some of these states that have it, I mean, it'd be a different module for the investigators. But the investigators did do like low-level audits that had the authority years and years and years ago. It's not in the statute or the rules anymore, but that's like something that I mean, I think it's explorable.
The citation, I thought that was too, again, though, I just am gonna keep reiterating that it doesn't guarantee confidentiality. I think it probably helps, I think resolution is probably quicker. And that citation maybe actually helps, eliminate the desire to ask for more information related to the complaint, because you can just pay it and it's appealable, and how often do people appeal it? So yeah, and the commission can move forward and it could request, you know what, we want anonymous complaints, we want this, we want to protect the complainant identity. I am just here to tell you why I think that's not ultimately, why you're not gonna get that, you're gonna move on that, because you've got these fundamental due process concerns in your licensing agency, and you're taking away people's, it's their ability to earn a living, right? And so, I don't mean to be, I know I keep hammering on this, but there's a reason I keep hammering on it. And I'm happy to visit with TDLR and anyone else you'd like me to.
And I'm fine with that, but I mean, we've moved it forward, or to the point now to where I think we'd be really careful in the due process. And I certainly trust your opinion on keeping us out of the woodshed.
On behalf of staff, just I know we're ready to move on, I'd like to say that we will not hold any cards back. Like, we don't see this as political. It is not ours to have a personal opinion on. We want to hand you information and give you our best advice. We would ask the same of each of you. You don't owe it to us, but if you have cards you'd like to play in a meeting, it would be helpful to have that information ahead, so that we can speak to things in a real educated, thoughtful way. But we're here to get to as many yeses as we possibly can.
Right.
I think that's true. I think that's true for me. I see this in advisory committee meetings too. It's, the more, I never get, that's not true. Sometimes I probably get grouchy when I get asked a lot of questions. I will admit to that. But that's not because I don't want to answer them. It's usually because we're in the middle of something and I'm like, But I want to look into this stuff and answer the questions, and I'm happy for, you to ask me more questions, or to say, well, so-and-so's doing it this way. I thought this was super helpful, looking at their responses, and then it was actually a little bit fun to kind of dig on their websites and then see, oh, well, wait, I don't know. It actually seems to me like they're answering it from this perspective, but it looks like they do it here, or no, look, maybe they do have that authority, 'cause we were pulling statutes on Friday and stuff like that. So I'm always happy to do that. I also want to try and get to yes, but it is a lot easier if I know what's coming my way and I'm able to be prepared and speak to it versus not. And that's why I ask, that's why I wanted to prepare this stuff for you all and get us there. So please keep sending me the questions. I really am happy to dig into them.
Well, I thought it was pretty interesting, especially North Dakota, where it must be notarized, and after 2 warnings or whatever, and they have 2,750 licensees.
Notary should go on.
Yeah.
Should be notarized.
It's kind of like in Montana.
Okay, good discussion. Ready to move on? Are we good? All right, the agenda 5 is discussion of possible action to appoint a working group to examine agency interpretation. Couple things on this. Broker responsibility brought up some issues on associate brokers. That's been brought up several times. We've kind of given that to broker responsibility working group to kind of take and run. on the associated broker, okay?
Yes.
We also have some questions on expansion teams, we got to talk about that a little bit earlier, and transaction coordinators. And I was talking to someone yesterday and they just closed on their house and they said, oh, we use a transaction coordinator. You mean like a third party? And I said, yeah, how was it? He goes, it was great. Well, we have a policy in our office that transaction coordinators have to be licensed because I don't want anybody using an unlicensed one. And then it was brought up, well, how do you work for multiple brokers at the same time as a transaction coordinator? And then it was brought up that Jan Fight's working for me. She gets her feelings hurt. She leaves. She has 3 deals under contract. Normally, I will let Jan Fight work those deals, get them to close, pay her. She earned the commission under my brokerage. But, you know, is she working under 2 brokers? So we always do an agreement between brokers. But what is that formalized? I mean, you know, if you're an expansion team and I'm an expansion team for Mark working in Jan Fight's office, who do I answer to? And so there's a lot of stuff we've been doing, but how have we been doing it? And so we're putting a work group together. Want a couple commissioners, if you're interested in that. Gonna reach out to Texas Realtors, of course. I'm gonna reach out to a couple of the large transaction coordinating companies and say, you know, how do you, I mean, we had an agent, his second year in the business, did 93 transactions, had a transaction coordinator, and everything worked great. But now I'm wondering, you know,
Who was he working for?
was our agreement enough to cover? And so we're gonna take that on as a working group. So if you have an interest in that, we have ourselves, we have a couple commissioners, Texas Realtors, a transaction coordinator. I'm gonna reach out to a company that has expansion teams, expansion agents or whatever, have
Not
them.
an expansion team for me, I'm sorry.
This
I've never
is
heard
like
that
a team that, crosses all brokerages, or multiple brokerages, that collaborates in some way. I don't know how, is it just networking?
The example I
term. Social
heard,
media, like
no,
the one that's Dallas something.
the example I heard is, I'm in El Paso, and I've got a great website, and I got all these connections, and you have an office in Dallas, and I hire an agent in Dallas, and they work with you. But I send them my referrals, almost like a Cardis team
like a
or
relocation.
a BGRS team or some type of referral team or whatever. That's what I understand, but I don't know. That's what I think the definition is, but we need to dig deep, because if that's the case, you're still responsible. I'm just making sure the leads I send you go to them.
You also
But-
want your money back.
Well, I want my money back.
Is it more
but-
of a referral network, or is it more?
That's the way but that's what we don't know. That's why we need to dig deep into it and find out. Because if it gives someone the ability to generate income and complete real estate transactions, and they're doing it within the rules, great. But we're not sure what, if we knew what it was, we wouldn't have this working group going together. Man, I love transaction coordinators, but have we kind of let them go without knowing?
This one came up, the transaction coordinator thing came up, because we had an article that said, here's what you can do for transaction coordinators, and then a question was asked, well, what if you have a transaction coordinator who's licensed and works under one brokerage, but does transaction coordinator work under a different brokerage, just non-license holder stuff, but just transaction coordinator stuff, is that okay? Yes. But as soon as they wade into the water of something that requires a license, then they're doing that for another broker. Is that a problem? So then you have the best practice of having a transaction coordinator who is licensed. There's a glitch to that, because if they're working for multiple, then there's trouble there, right? Or it's not clear how to
But if
handle.
the boss of the having grown up, I was a transaction coordinator for our company at one time. And working for all the different agents in the company. And could I have picked sides and said, okay, I'll do this for Scott, but I'm not gonna do it for Leslie? Yeah, I could have done that. But if you had a broker over a company of transaction coordinators and they were mostly admin,
But they're all under one broker, you're cool.
that's right, it's when they're not.
Is this the same thing as a contract to close
Yeah, they used to, yeah,
person?
the closing, yeah.
They just take it.
But it's different than like a virtual. A lot of people using virtual assistants, and all they do is prepare a listening agreement for 2805 Bob Hope, prepare a management agreement for this. All they're doing is, they're no contact with anybody in the transaction.
It's just paperwork.
And the challenge to some of this is that everyone's definition is different.
It's the fudge factor.
Right, and then of course, and we found this even developing it internally and having them licensed under us, that it is still, it's like, so what's the service offering that we're really talking about here? And what items here do require a licensed person to be handling them versus not? You know, and so it got so murky, we just said, look, you know, everybody's gonna be licensed, they're gonna work for us only, but, you know, on the other hand, I got agents I know that are using outside transaction coordinators, and I really don't have a clue in some cases.
And as long as you don't have to react, because there's no problems, everything's safe and happy.
Yeah.
But then you have, good
Right up until
agents
it's not.
asking questions, saying what's okay, what's not, and we're like,
Yeah.
well.
But as a broker, I know that paperwork's getting done, I know everything's getting turned in, and because we have great agents that are great salespeople, and they're not real good on paperwork, and I might be talking about myself, okay? And so that, it helps them, but we gotta define. So anyway, that working group is going together, and we might be biting off more than we can chew, okay? The future dates of workshop and commission meetings, I mentioned yesterday, I got a crazy idea. I would like one commission meeting in 2023 to be off-site. When I say off-site, Dallas or Houston. I sat on the TWIA board, people in Houston know what that is.
Yeah.
And they have one meeting in Corpus, one meeting in Galveston every year, I think it would be good for our shareholders and good for our license holders to take this on the road. And I'm not saying we can get it done.
Yeah.
But I think that would be cool. We were gonna check some dates and see. How did the survey come out as far as, like a commission meeting out of Austin?
So we typed up some bullets and they're on the surface right now. You should have like some bar charts of what people said.
Yeah.
And this is without the Houston idea included. Not just because we didn't have the idea until yesterday.
So it was about changing the days.
So a majority of commissioners were interested in moving to a Thursday workshop, Friday meeting. And we talked about this a little bit. So the February one, we wouldn't do that with just because it's already tied to that CE credit and the TR meeting. Now, this may not be as relevant, though we'd probably need, I wanna say college graduations are like almost all the same weekend. You always wanna look at your graduation dates for May because Thursday, Friday is a different ballgame than,
Mother's Day, we're always at NAR.
yeah. Yeah, well, but also like if you wanna think hotel rooms, Thursday, Friday rates, well, one, you're always in the weekend, but if it's a UT graduation and you're here, I don't know if U of H carries the same, if they have the same visitation,
It'd be easier at UNH from.
it would, okay, so.
Bigger hotel, yeah, smaller, but there's.
So that's always a consideration, and we're trying to figure out how to figure out like what's going on in Houston in May. I think we can, I think we can look and see if anything's happening.
Yeah, you don't wanna do rodeo that March.
Right, that's
February.
February, yeah.
First of March.
Again, just an idea.
No, I think we
Thinking
can.
outside the box.
I just think when we wrote this, we wrote UT graduation dates just because of that factor of like hotel rooms basically don't exist. The Thursday, Friday. Now, the regular Monday, Tuesday, they do. UT football games can impact November dates. We looked at the other things, like F1 and stuff, and that's all October. And the only other consideration when it comes to doing a workshop commission meeting is that your return home probably looks a little bit different, because you'd be doing a workshop and then you would be doing a full commission meeting. And like yesterday, we went to 307 or 309, something very.
It started at 10.
Yeah, started at 10, that's right, started at 10, so if we started at 9 in Houston, look at me, I'm brown girl.
Friday.
We started at 9 on a Friday, so maybe you go to 2, but for anyone who's flying out or for who's got a long drive or whatever, that may look a little bit different on a Friday. That doesn't mean, I'm not advising against it, I'm just trying to throw in like all of the things that people have to think about, and I think everybody right now is pretty close, but we don't know, maybe somebody comes from
So on the
Amarillo
commission
or-
meetings, you would be doing, it's at 9, so you would be leaving later, which like daylight savings time, like it is now, it would be dark.
It would be dark, yeah, which I've done that drive to Houston in the dark and I don't like it.
So are we still talking about the same format on the 2-day meeting format?
It would be I think what we put in there was like a Thursday afternoon workshop
Yeah.
and then a Friday,
Well,
regular
so
commission.
that would potentially cut a night off.
Right, you could come in during that
Easily.
morning of, yeah, but your Friday night return might look good, all of which is fine, I just wanna,
Driving home in the dark, that's the worst part.
I just wanna throw out like all of the thoughts around like travel and considerations.
Yeah.
It could be cool though, I mean, I'll
But most
say.
of the commission meetings are over by, I mean, yesterday was a later one.
Yesterday was a later one, and if you start an hour earlier, you're probably closer to the 2 o'clock range.
What kind of staff do you have to take with you, by the way, if we do it
To a location. That's what we're trying to figure out. I think we'd pare it down.
Yes, but probably most of the people that are before you, the division directors,
So
this
it's,
crew.
yeah,
It's gonna cost quite a bit.
yeah, I started saying, look, yeah.
We probably try to work it out to where it would be just a one night and so that
Right.
You could see all
for the single mom, and that scenario, that sort of thing. Totally doable though.
Yeah, and one of the pros of doing a workshop is, you know, you could, I think we did that at TJJD, right? We did all of our workshops the day before, and so then when you got to the meeting, you could, you know, they were ready to vote on
Had a little bit more information.
the stuff, yeah.
Well, my opinion is you tell me what day it is and I'll be here, okay? I'm pretty easy, okay?
Do you wanna try did you wanna try a Thursday, Friday? I mean, we could do that, maybe, I'm throwing this out there, but like, you could do that for the May one in Houston.
Yeah, question for you, since, I mean, we don't know when we're getting new commissioners, and we're meeting for sure in February too. Should we wait and see if we have them, so they can
Because,
their opinions in or availability?
yeah, we could.
What's that?
I think, open to that. I think also, I want, how many of you feel like it's important to schedule the meetings like for 2023? Just for purposes of like your vacations and.
All of the above, yeah.
Yeah, but all possible, yeah.
It seems like that may trump the, when are we getting new commissioners and then when are they available? It's almost like if we could just acquire them and say, here's when the
Right.
meetings are. That may be, just because of the unknown, we'll
Right.
never know when we get them. I think it's helpful for y'all and for us really to just be able to make plans. When can we go to the beach? When we go to the
Right.
mountains?
We'll get some dates. I mean, let's try Thursday, Friday. I'm good with that.
Do you wanna try Thursday, Friday for the May, since it's already kind of a fish out of water?
Yeah.
So we could do, look to Houston.
Hotel, I really do.
Yeah, that's right. Look to
Yeah,
Houston.
but Houston, that's not a drive.
Yeah, I'm seeing some strong votes for Houston down here. So
And
we
then
could,
Dallas and then.
yeah, no, I know,
And move
mean,
it
whatever.
on, the
Yeah.
obvious third choice.
yeah.
I'm in.
So, okay, so we'll look at dates, I think typically it's that, what, like this, the fourth, isn't it always, there's a little bit of a joke on that?
So if you go to Houston, would you do it like in HAR building or?
I don't know, we haven't talked about it yet.
That's a great idea.
That's, I
Yes,
think,
it is.
and they would be welcoming
Yeah,
it, yeah, they'd love it.
So,
What?
I would think so.
Could you
Mr.
open
Hill
it
would put on the ritz, I'm sure.
to
so it'd be
that
the,
area? That's a
the
good
fourth and the fifth,
Oh, that's a good thought.
let's see.
Then we'd have a party.
Yeah. Okay, so it would be,
Jennifer, just have
Lori
to,
Parker.
okay.
I'll put you on.
so the fourth and the fifth are the Thursday and Friday for May,
She knows it, but it.
if that seems roughly cool.
Yes, the question was, could we offer CE to Houston area people if we did that? I'm not asking for an answer, I just want that to be in your camp.
Just about-
Wondering, that might be problematic because you're offering something to a
Yeah.
geographic location you can't offer to everyone. But,
It's a huge region, it's a huge region.
we offer it to everyone
In
in
February.
February because they're in Austin for
It's still a limited
Still a
group of
population.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how that's different.
Well, we can look at that for sure. Why don't we say we will look at the fourth and fifth and maybe hold for 11 and 12 just in case?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
You have to just check and see if there's an oil and gas conference.
well, yeah,
I can ask, I'm president of the Friends of Houston,
okay,
so I'll ask him.
that would be really helpful. So then August,
Well, that's true.
in August, we could look at, if you wanted to do, it depends on what you wanna do. If you wanna try Thursday, Friday in May, and then we pick up that cycle, after November and just keep with Monday, Tuesday, or do you just wanna say we're doing it? Let's do it.
Let's try Thursday, Friday. Keep to Monday, Tuesday for August and November and see how the Thursday, Friday works for the next year. Is that,
I
I
think
mean,
that's.
everybody's kinda, yeah.
The
So
Texas
then-
Realtors will not be a problem for Thursday, Friday,
Not in May.
Probably for February,
from February, that's what I was thinking.
Monday, we'll have to stick to that one. So if we move to Thursday, Friday, it would be for the others.
So we've got, the 7th and the 8th is when, of August is when we would kind of normally do that, everybody,
I think Galveston's big.
7th and 8th
I'm good with
August.
that. The earlier the better.
You have only 3 commissioners who
7 and
think it's relevant to them.
7th and 8th,
of August.
what day?
That's Monday, Tuesday,
That's the week we usually have it, right?
yeah.
That's when I usually have to come in and out of town, that's okay. I'm just looking.
Yeah,
But it's
no,
just
that's
me.
what this is for, I mean,
So the 7th and 8th.
You want? No.
I'll have to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, way ahead.
I mean, the 14th and the 15th are also options, but it's usually the 7th and 8th, so, I mean, in that it's that first week, but I don't,
If we can keep it in the first week, it's just easier.
okay,
Then
Alright.
butt up against
alright, so, oh, that's right, you're right,
school
school,
starting,
okay,
which is irrelevant to.
And then November, there is no election day this year.
yeah, so November, we could look at the, 6th and 7th.
That works.
Okay, I don't know when the, NAR, don't they usually have a,
When y'all decide, will you send out a
Yes, ma'am.
notification to everybody?
yeah, I think Amber usually sends calendar invites so you can like lock it into your,
Okay, future workshop agenda items? You know, those kind of pop up, you know,
they happen.
those kind of happen.
I'd watch what comes out of BRWG.
I think you're almost definitely gonna have something out of the RWG to discuss
agree.
at February.
We hope so.
If I know then,
Yeah, because we're gonna do
associate broker.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I want to thank everybody. Again, I want to say, bring your ideas, bring your concerns, get it to staff. Staff, just like Chelsea said, she worded it so well. She wants to give the yeses. Yet at the same time, there's sometimes they can't. And we need to respect that and understand that. And I mean, there's a lot of things that I wanted staff to do, and I think they could have done it. And I think it will get done. I mean, I would love financing moved to renewal and a full 30-hour TREC license act and broker responsibility being the pre-license. You know, there's certain things like that I think it's almost like broker lawyer where they have this working list of what they need to do with the contracts when the opportunity happens. And so I think when we get a no from staff, it's like real estate. It's not no, it's not at this time, you know, and do what?
Take it under advisement.
Yeah, and then it's over there. So I don't want anybody to get discouraged bringing it forward, but at the same time, also know the boundaries. They're gonna do what they can do, but ultimately they're gonna protect us and the agency, and I think that's key.
Yeah.
And I think, I know the first 45 minutes might have been boring and y'all knew all that or whatever, but y'all, we've got to do
Very
that.
stimulating.
Yeah.
And I meant the material, not the presenter. We've got to do that.
You said boring.
Yeah, because
It was 104 degrees over.
I'm sitting in advisory groups and they say, well, this so-and-so broker, and they don't talk about limited services, they talk about compensation, and just, we can't, you know, and so I think, and I told Vanessa the other day after one of the meetings, I called her and said, we need a public service announcement before every meeting starts.
Yeah, apparently so.
You know, and she said, I got it, and that's why I really wanted to kind of focus on that, because when I go somewhere, they don't call me Scott, they say, hey, how's the commissioner? When you're out in the public, you are recognized as a commissioner.
Honorable. I get honorable.
Yeah, well, believe me, nobody in El Paso calls me honorable, okay?
Yeah, I don't get that a lot.
But like, they don't want me to teach pre-license. The only time I teach is if there's an emergency, an instructor died, and I taught one class. But I teach in our office because they don't want them to say, well, the commissioner said this. And y'all, I love teaching. I just absolutely love it. But it's restricted because I'm looked at as a commissioner, not an instructor. And so I think that was very important, okay? So I want to thank y'all for everything you do for the agency, and we are adjourned unless anybody has anything. We're adjourned at 12:15.
You're so